You call that warm? Vivian snapped, snatching the teacup from Clara's hands and slamming it onto the silver tray so hard the spoon jumped. My future mother-in-law is shaking in bed. The tea is barely hot, and you still expect to stay in this house? Nathan Vale sat 3 feet away in a velvet armchair, eyes fixed on nothing, shoulders slack, the perfect picture of a rich man whose mind had been wiped clean. But if you stay with this story, you'll hear how that same man let everyone believe he was lost, watched his glamorous fiancée move to steal his fortune, and saved the one woman in the house who stayed loyal when nobody was looking. Rosalind Vale lay propped against a mountain of pillows, her thin fingers trembling against the blanket. The room smelled of starch, rose cream, and medicine. An oxygen machine hummed softly near the bed. Clara, still holding the tray, looked like she wanted to disappear into the wallpaper. Her hands were red from hot water and bleach. One cuff of her plain dress was damp where tea had splashed on it. She swallowed and said very quietly, "I made it fresh, ma'am. Mrs. Vale just asked for honey first." Vivian gave a short laugh, cold and polished. She was dressed for lunch in cream silk, diamonds at her ears, hair pinned so neatly it looked carved into place. "Then maybe next time," she said. "You'll learn to think faster. That's what people in service are paid for." Nathan did not blink. That was the role now. The pauses, the drifting stare, the slow turn of the head when spoken to. Weeks ago, after the crash, Vivian told everyone he couldn't remember names, dates, or even his own routines. In 3 days, she planned to stand before a judge at a guardianship hearing and say his shattered mind made him unfit to run anything, his company, his house, even his own life. She had rehearsed the story so often, she almost sounded sincere. Almost. What she did not know was that the man in that chair remembered everything. He remembered the rain-slick road, the twisted metal, the hospital lights, and one ugly little moment of bedside betrayal that had changed him more than the accident itself. Rosalind reached weakly toward Clara. "Dear, the honey." Her voice was thin, almost swallowed by the room. Clara moved at once, setting down the tray, adding a careful spoonful, testing the heat against her wrist like someone who had done this for a child or a sick parent 100 times before. Vivian watched her with open disgust. "Enjoy this while you can," she said, not even bothering to lower her voice. "A proper care home would have trained staff, fixed schedules, no confusion, no household drama, and it would cost half as much as keeping this entire floor alive for one patient." Rosalind's lips parted and hurt. Clara froze. Nathan's jaw tightened for one dangerous second, then went loose again. He let his hands slide over the armrest as if he were searching for it. Vivian saw the movement and smiled, satisfied. To her, that tiny gesture meant weakness. To Nathan, it meant hold still. Not yet. Then she took one step closer to Clara and lowered her voice into something even meaner because it was softer. "Listen carefully," she said. "When the court gives me control, I'm reviewing every salary, every room, every wasted expense in this place. And if Mrs. Vale has one more bad afternoon under your watch, I'll say you neglected her. Do you understand?" Clara's face lost its color. The tray rattled in her hands. She looked, just for a second, toward Nathan, checking whether he even understood what was happening. He kept the blank expression in place, though inside, his thoughts were razor sharp. Clara still didn't know she was standing beside a man in feigned amnesia. She thought she was alone in that room with a dying woman and a predator in silk. Vivian turned then, all perfume and contempt, and crouched beside Nathan's chair. Her voice changed instantly, sweet enough to rot your teeth. "Nathan, darling, do you know who I am today?" she asked, stroking his sleeve like she was comforting him for an audience that wasn't there. He lifted his eyes to her face with deliberate confusion. "You're..." He let the word hang, as if even that took effort. Vivian's smile widened. Clara looked away, as if the sight itself embarrassed her. "It's Vivian," the fiancé cooed, The woman who takes care of everything for you now. Nathan nodded slowly, the way she liked. Obedient, broken, manageable. But when she stood and walked toward the door, she made one mistake. She forgot he could still hear perfectly, still think perfectly, still remember every syllable. And in the hallway, just beyond Rosalind's room, Nathan caught the start of a phone call that made his blood run cold. If this kind of story is for you, subscribe now, because the words Vivian said next were the real beginning of Nathan's revenge. What drifted in from the hallway was calculation. Vivian's heels clicked across the polished floor, then stopped just outside Rosalind's door. Nathan kept his face empty, his breathing slow. Through the narrow opening, her voice changed again, losing all that syrup she used on him. "No, don't be dramatic," she whispered into the phone. "The hearing is in 3 days. Once the judge signs off, I'll have authority over the accounts, the estate house, everything that matters." A pause, soft laughter. "Of course I've checked. In his condition, he can't challenge anything." Clara stood frozen by Rosalind's tea tray, head lowered, as if she were trying hard not to hear. But she heard enough to go pale. Nathan heard every word, and every word took him back to the first time he understood exactly what Vivian was. That first time happened under hospital lights so bright they flattened the world into white and silver. Weeks earlier, his car had left the road in a sheet of rain, skidding through a guardrail and down a muddy slope before the airbags exploded in his face. He remembered the stink of burned rubber, the copper taste in his mouth, and the ache in his ribs when strangers cut him from the wreck. By the time he woke in recovery, his head was bandaged, his body felt packed with broken glass, and voices moved around him like shapes behind water. One of those voices belonged to Vivienne. He knew it before he opened his eyes. Low, polished, controlled. She thought he was still under. He had expected fear, maybe tears, maybe one raw question. Is he going to be all right? Instead, he heard, "I need a straight answer. If his memory doesn't come back, who controls the trust? The house was still in his father's name before probate finished, wasn't it? And the resort shares, those can't just sit there while he stares at walls." Someone tried to calm her. A doctor, then a nurse, then another doctor with a quieter voice, but she kept going. "I'm the one who has to manage the fallout. I need timelines. If he's permanently impaired, I want to know what steps exist for guardianship." Nathan lay there under the thin hospital blanket, hands heavy, eyes closed, and felt something inside him turn to ice. That was the true crash, that bedside betrayal. The next morning, Dr. Miles Hargrove came in alone. He was tired, careful, and decent enough to shut the door before he spoke plainly. Nathan's scans looked better than expected. Bruising, concussion, short-term disorientation, yes, but there was no sign of total memory destruction. Rest, quiet, monitoring. That was the plan. Nathan listened, then asked only one question. Did she ask how I was before she asked about the money? The doctor hesitated, and that hesitation answered everything. Nathan turned his face toward the ceiling and stayed silent so long the monitor beside him seemed louder than his breathing. Then he said, very calmly, "Tell them I don't remember. Tell them it's worse than it is." The doctor stared at him. Nathan did not explain himself right away. He didn't need to. After another long beat, he said, "I need to know whether the woman beside my bed loves me, or just the vault she thinks I'm standing in front of." From that moment on, the performance began. When nurses asked his date of birth, he gave them the year after a delay. When Vivian entered, he looked at her as if he almost knew her, then let the recognition slip away. He missed easy details on purpose, held the wrong spoon, forgot which hand he wrote with until he relearned it. She played the devoted fiancée beautifully when other people were in the room. She straightened his blanket, kissed his forehead, told visitors this was all so heartbreaking. Then the visitors left, and she started probing. "Do you remember your signatures? Do you remember the beach house documents? Do you remember if your father left sealed instructions anywhere? Nathan answered with confusion, with silence, with the carefully measured fog of feigned amnesia. Every question she asked told him what mattered to her. None of it was him. By the time he came home, he had already started the hidden notebook. Real paper, folded into a worn leather journal tucked where only he would think to look. Dates. Phrases. Expenses. Names. The exact wording of what she said when she believed his mind was gone. And tonight, after hearing her in the hallway talk about everything that matters, he knew he needed to add another page. Clara finally moved, lifting Rosalind's cup with careful hands. But before she reached the bed, Vivian came back through the doorway wearing that tender expression again. And this time, she wasn't alone. A man in a navy suit stepped in behind her carrying a leather portfolio. And Vivian said, with a smile Nathan knew too well, "Darling, this is Mr. Bell from Legal. He's here to help us with a few simple papers." Mr. Bell moved with the careful politeness of a man who knew he had walked into a sick room and a fight at the same time. He smelled faintly of aftershave and damp wool, as if he had come in straight from a rainy drive. The leather portfolio in his hand gave a soft creak when he set it on the side table. Vivian stood beside him, one hand resting on Nathan's shoulder in a gesture that looked loving from across the room and controlling from up close. "These are nothing alarming," she said brightly. "Just a few temporary papers so I can manage calls, bills, appointments, all the tedious things while you get better." Nathan turned his head slowly toward the sound of her voice, letting confusion settle over his face like sleep. "Papers?" he repeated, as if the word itself had to be reached through fog. Mr. Bell glanced at him, then at Rosalind in bed, then at Clara, who had lowered the tea tray onto a small round table and stepped back. The maid kept her eyes down, but she was listening. Nathan could tell. There was a stillness in her that only comes when a decent person senses something wrong and doesn't yet know how dangerous it is. Vivian opened the folder and began sliding pages out one by one. Cream paper, blue tabs, gold clips. She had arranged them beautifully, like an invitation suite for a wedding. "This one lets me speak to your doctors freely," she said. "This one allows me to oversee household payments. This one gives me temporary authority to review your business correspondence so nothing gets missed." Temporary. Such an innocent word. Nathan knew enough about documents to hear the trap hiding inside it. She wasn't asking to order groceries. She was laying the first stones of a legal road straight toward the guardianship hearing. Mr. Bell cleared his throat. "For the record, Mr. Vale, I am here only to explain, not to pressure. If there is any uncertainty about your understanding, we can postpone." Vivian's smile tightened for a fraction of a second. "He understands more than he can express," she said quickly. "Don't you, darling?" Nathan let his eyes drift to the papers without focusing on them. Then he reached out with the wrong hand, missed the folder entirely, and brushed the edge of the tea tray instead. Porcelain clicked softly. Clara stepped forward on instinct to steady it. Vivian shot her a look so sharp it could have cut cloth. Rosalind stirred against her pillows. "Nathan?" she whispered. Her son heard the strain in that one word. He hated using her fear as cover, but he needed time. So he leaned into the role. "I know that name," he murmured, staring at the papers as if they might answer him. Vivian crouched beside him at once. "Of course you do," she said. "You're doing so well. Just sign where Mr. Bell marks, and I'll take care of the rest." Nathan took the pen she pressed into his fingers. He rolled it slowly, as though he had forgotten what it was for. Then he looked up at Mr. Bell and asked in the uncertain voice of a damaged man, "If I sign, does the house move?" That question changed the room. Mr. Bell blinked. Clara looked over before she could stop herself. Rosalind let out a weak little sound, half confusion, half pain. Vivian laughed too fast. "No, sweetheart, of course not. He means the paperwork, Mr. Bell. He gets these odd, mixed-up phrases sometimes." But the attorney had heard enough to become careful in a different way. He adjusted his cuff, picked up the top sheet, and started reading aloud instead of handing it over. His tone flattened into pure legal caution. Medical access, banking communication, interim control over accounts payable, authority to review operating contracts, authority to speak in Nathan's name on urgent matters. With each line, Vivian's shoulders relaxed, as if hearing those powers spoken into the air pleased her more than she could hide. Nathan lowered the pen and let his hand tremble. That part took no acting. Rage will do strange things to the muscles. "Too much," he said softly. I can't see where the words stop." Belle's eyes lifted at once. "Then we should delay." "No," Vivian snapped, then caught herself. "I mean, no need to upset him with legal language. He trusts me." Nathan kept staring at the page. "Does it say you can sell things?" he asked. Silence. Very brief, very telling. Mr. Bell answered before she could. "Some of these clauses touch property decisions, yes." Vivian rose so fast her bracelet struck the table and made a bright, angry sound. "This is ridiculous. He's exhausted. We're done for today." She gathered the papers with crisp, irritated movements, but not before Nathan caught two words at the top of one page. Durable authority. That was enough. A few minutes later, Belle was gone. Vivian had vanished downstairs to make furious calls, and the room exhaled. Clara changed Rosalind's pillowcase because the older woman had begun sweating from stress. The fresh linen smelled of soap and lavender starch. Nathan sat quietly, watching Clara tuck the corners with the neat, practiced hands of someone who had done hard work all her life. When Rosalind finally drifted into a fragile doze, Clara turned to Nathan and said, almost apologetically, "Would you like me to show you your room again, sir? You seemed unsettled." He nodded. She walked him there slowly, never grabbing, never pushing, just staying close enough that he could hear the soft rustle of her skirt and the faint jingle of keys at her waist. At his door, she paused and pointed things out in a low voice, as if teaching a patient child while trying to preserve the dignity of a grown man. "Your bed is to the left, water on the nightstand, sweaters in the second drawer. If you wait confused, ring once and I'll come." Then she hesitated, fingers tightening around the doorknob. "And don't sign anything when you're tired." Nathan looked at her then, really looked, though he made sure it seemed unfocused. After she left, he crossed to his desk, reached behind a row of old travel books, and pulled out the small leather journal. He wrote down every clause he remembered, every change in Belle's face, every word Clara had said. Then he opened a drawer, took out a sealed envelope and an old account token from one of his dormant side funds, and set them where a cleaner would have to notice them in the morning. At dawn, he intended to learn who in that house could be trusted with temptation, and who could not. By dawn, the envelope was waiting exactly where he had left it, half hidden under a crystal paperweight on the writing desk by the window. The room carried that early morning stillness wealthy houses always seem to have, when the air is cool, the carpets swallow footsteps, and the silver outside on the terrace still holds the damp of the night. Nathan stood in his dressing robe, listening. Somewhere down the hall, a vacuum hummed for a moment and then cut off. Pipes ticked in the walls. Below, a door opened and shut. He had placed the old account token and the sealed envelope in plain sight for one reason only. Not because the money inside mattered. The account had been dormant for years, and the access phrase inside led nowhere useful now. He wanted to see what temptation did to the people around him. A man in feigned amnesia could not ask that question out loud, so he set the answer on the desk and waited. Clara came first. He heard her before he saw her, the soft scrape of a laundry basket against the doorframe, then the careful pause of someone entering a room she respected. "Good morning, sir," she said quietly, as if loud words might bruise him. Nathan was sitting in the armchair by the fireplace, staring at the unlit grate with that same vague distance Vivian found so convincing. Clara crossed to the bed, stripped the sheets, shook them once, neatly, and began making fresh corners with quick, strong hands. Then she noticed the envelope. He could see it happen in the tiny change in her breathing. She picked it up, turned it over once, and saw the old token slide halfway out. Any other person in that house might have opened it from curiosity alone. Clara tucked the token back in, walked straight over, and placed both items in his lap. "I think this is important," she said. It was near the edge. It could have fallen. Nathan looked down at it, then up at her, letting uncertainty sit on his face. "Mine?" he asked. Clara's expression softened. "I think so." She hesitated, then added in a lower voice, "If you don't want anyone else touching your speakers, I can clear a drawer and keep things in one place till you feel steadier." There was no greed in her voice, no cleverness, just practical kindness. Nathan let his fingers fumble around the seal as if he didn't know what to do with it. Clara reached for the drawer of the bedside table, lined it with a folded linen napkin so the wood wouldn't scratch the paper, and placed the envelope there like it belonged to a human being, not to a fortune. Then, before leaving, she noticed one of his buttons hanging loose on a shirt laid over the chair. "Would you like me to mend that later?" she asked. Nathan nodded. When she stepped out, the room still held the clean scent of soap from her hands. Vivian came in less than 20 minutes later, carrying her phone, a coffee cup, and impatience like a perfume. She was already dressed for the day in pale blue silk and gold bracelets that clicked every time she moved. "Nathan, there you are," she said too brightly. "You missed your call with the therapist." He turned his head toward her and said nothing. She set the coffee down without drinking it and began to tidy the room in the way people do when they are not really tidying, only searching. She opened the top drawer of the dresser, then the second. She adjusted a stack of books that did not need adjusting. Her eyes kept sliding toward the desk. "Have you been in here alone this morning?" she asked. Nathan rubbed his thumb slowly over the armrest and said, "I woke up." That answer seemed to irritate her. "Yes, darling, I know that." She crossed to the desk, found the space where the envelope had been, and went still. It was only for a second, but he saw it. Her hand touched the crystal paperweight. Her eyes narrowed. Then she turned and smiled at him as if nothing at all had happened. "Did Clara clean in here already?" she asked. Nathan blinked once. "Clara?" She exhaled through her nose, the smallest sign that she was losing patience. "The maid," she said. "The girl who hovers around my future mother-in-law like she owns the place." Nathan let his gaze drift away. Vivian opened the bedside drawer. She was fast, but not fast enough. She saw the envelope, lifted it, weighed it in her hand, and very nearly broke the seal before footsteps sounded in the hall. She slipped it back where she found it, just as Clara appeared at the door with a sewing kit and a glass bottle of water for Rosalind. For one sharp instant, the two women faced each other in the middle of Nathan's room. Clara with a pincushion on her wrist, threads looped around her fingers, the hem of her plain skirt brushed with dust from work. Vivian with polished nails, hot coffee going cold, and fury hidden under a smile. "Perfect timing," Vivian said. "Since you seem so attached to this floor, perhaps you can explain why you've started sorting Mr. Vale's private belongings without permission." Clara stopped short. "I only moved an envelope so it wouldn't fall." "How thoughtful," Vivian replied. "And did you read it while you were protecting it?" Clara's cheeks flushed at once. "No, ma'am." "Really?" Vivian stepped closer. "Because in this house, staff have a habit of mistaking proximity for privilege." Nathan stayed motionless, but inside, his mind was writing every word into that same mental ledger. Clara tightened her grip on the sewing tin until the metal lid clicked. "I didn't open anything," she said. "Then maybe you won't mind if I check your apron pockets before breakfast," Vivian said lightly. Clara looked stunned. Nathan lifted his head a fraction, just enough to see the exact moment hurt turned into humiliation on her face. And before Clara could answer, Rosalind's bell began ringing wildly from down the hall. The bell kept ringing, fast and uneven, the kind of panicked sound that makes a whole house feel suddenly too small. Clara moved first. Her sewing tin hit the side table with a sharp little clatter, and she was already in the hall before Vivian had finished turning her head. Nathan followed more slowly, keeping the act intact, one hand trailing along the wall as though he needed it to find his way. Rosalind's room was warmer than the corridor, heavy with the smell of lavender rub and the faint plastic scent of the oxygen line. The older woman was half upright in bed, breath coming quick and shallow, one thin hand clutching at the blanket near her chest. Clara crossed to her at once. She didn't ask permission. She didn't freeze. She reached for the inhalation mask on the bedside stand, checked the tube with practiced fingers, raised Rosalind higher on the pillows, and said in a steady voice, "Look at me, Mrs. Vale. Small breaths. That's it. Stay with me." Vivian came in behind them, angry more than alarmed. "What happened now?" she snapped. Clara didn't even look back. "Stress," she said. "Please open the vent and give me space." For 1 second, Vivian just stared, as if she couldn't believe a maid had spoken to her that way. Then Nathan, still wearing that fogged expression, murmured, "Mother?" And the room rearranged itself around his weakness. Vivian rushed to him for show. Clara stayed with Rosalind for real. By the time the breathing eased, the bed linens were damp, Clara's sleeve was creased from where Rosalind had gripped it, and Nathan had learned something far more valuable than whether Clara would steal. She knew where every medicine sat, which pillow helped his mother's lungs, how long to wait between doses, and how to lower fear without raising her voice. This was work learned the hard way. After Rosalind drifted into a fragile sleep, Clara changed the pillowcase, wiped the older woman's forehead with a cloth cooled under running water, and quietly wrote down the time of the episode on a notepad she kept in the bedside drawer. Nathan noticed the small details, the neat handwriting, the exact minute, the half-used pencil worn down from being sharpened too many times. Vivian noticed something else. She noticed that her threat had failed. She folded her arms and said in a tone sweet enough to curdle milk, "You seem very comfortable giving instructions in my house." Clara wrung out the cloth over a basin and answered without lifting her eyes, "I was trying to calm her breathing." "And who asked you to keep records?" Vivian asked, nodding toward the notepad. Clara looked up then, just once. "No one, but the doctor said consistency matters." That answer landed badly. Nathan saw it in Vivian's face. Care, when it is done well, becomes evidence, and evidence was the one thing she did not want growing inside these walls. Later that afternoon, the house settled into one of those expensive silences built from thick rugs and closed doors. Nathan sat in the sunroom off the West Hall, while Clara tried to guide him through another small piece of his daily routine. His watch tray, his reading chair, the cabinet where he used to keep loose change and receipts. She spoke gently, never too slowly, never with the false cheer people use on someone they think is broken. "This drawer sticks on the left," she told him, placing his hand on the brass pull. "And the blue mug is yours. Mrs. Vale says you always hated the white porcelain because it made coffee taste thin." Nathan almost smiled at that. Rosalind would remember something as small as a coffee mug. Clara handed him the blue one, and the ceramic still carried a little warmth from the kitchen. "You don't have to force it," she said quietly. "If things come back, they come back." He tilted his head as if struggling to follow. "You remember a lot," he said. "Only what helps," she replied. After a tiny pause, "Someone should." That sentence stayed with him long after she left the room. He wrote it down that night in the hidden notebook, along with the time of Rosalind's episode, the exact words about "my house," and one more detail that mattered. While Clara had been airing blankets and sorting medicine cups, Vivian had spent 40 minutes downstairs on the phone with someone from a private care placement service. Nathan had heard enough as he passed the study under escort earlier in the day. "Yes, short-term first," she had said. "No, sentiment is not a factor. I need discreet, affordable, and immediate availability." Rosalind was no longer a burden she complained about in the abstract. Vivian was actively shopping for a cheaper place to send her. Nathan's hand pressed so hard into the notebook page that the pen nearly tore through the paper. The next morning brought a fresh cruelty, polished and smiling. At breakfast, Nathan was guided to the small family dining room, while rain tapped at the long windows and the silver coffee pot sent up curls of steam. Rosalind was too weak to come down, so Clara carried a tray upstairs first before slipping back to pour tea. Vivian arrived in a fitted cream suit with a tablet tucked under her arm and a glow on her face that meant she was pleased with herself. "Good news," she said, buttering toast she had no intention of eating. "I've moved things forward. The guardianship hearing has been confirmed for Thursday morning." She said it the way other women announce a holiday trip. Nathan lowered his gaze to the untouched eggs on his plate. Clara went very still beside the sideboard. Vivienne took a sip of coffee and continued. "Also, to avoid any confusion before court, I've arranged for an outside nurse to assess Rosalind's care. Independent eyes, proper documentation, all very professional." She turned her head just enough for Clara to feel it. "If anyone here has been careless, this will settle it." Clara set down the teapot with both hands. The porcelain clicked against the saucer. Vivienne smiled directly at her and said, "She'll be here tomorrow, and I've already told her where to look." The next day began too neatly, which in that house was usually a sign that something ugly had been planned before breakfast. Nathan heard it in the rhythm of the morning. No slammed doors, no raised voice from Vivienne, no sharp little bursts of irritation from the kitchen. Instead, there was quiet order, polished and arranged, like a stage set before the audience walks in. Clara moved through it with a different kind of quiet. Real quiet. The kind that comes from worry. She carried Rosalind's tray upstairs with both hands, checked the older woman's temperature, changed the water jug, and wrote down medication times in the same small, careful script as always. Nathan watched from the doorway of the adjoining sitting room while pretending to study the pattern in the wallpaper. His mother's room smelled faintly of chamomile, face cream, and the medicinal mint of a chest rub. Clara tucked the blanket around Rosalind's knees and asked, "Are you warm enough?" Rosalind gave the smallest nod and touched the girl's wrist in thanks. By mid-morning, Vivian's guest arrived. The nurse introduced herself as Denise Harrow. She wore expensive scrubs under a camel coat, pearl studs in her ears, and a watch that flashed when she lifted her hand to shake Vivian's. Her smile was professional, but her eyes moved fast, measuring the room, the furniture, the medication cart, the condition of the sheets. She smelled of salon shampoo and strong citrus perfume, nothing like the clean soap Clara carried with her. Vivian ushered her inside with too much warmth. "Thank you for coming on short notice," she said. "I'm just desperate to make sure Rosalind is receiving proper care. And, well, with Nathan in his condition, the burden has fallen on me." Denise glanced toward him. Nathan gave her the same unfocused, delayed response he gave everyone. A beat late, slightly blank, harmless. Clara stood beside the bed, hands folded at her waist. "Mrs. Vale had her medication at 8, she said. "Her breathing tightened once during the night, but settled after steam in the inhaler." Denise turned to her with polite surprise, as if the maid speaking in useful details was already inconvenient. "You've been administering medication?" she asked. "Under the schedule left by Dr. Brenner," Clara replied. She reached into the bedside drawer and took out the notepad, then a folder Nathan had not seen before. Inside were pharmacy printouts, refill dates, and handwritten notes on sleep, appetite, coughing, and pulse changes. Clara had built a patient record with scraps of time and discipline. Denise took the folder, flipped through it, and for one brief second lost the smugness she'd entered with. The records were good, maybe better than she expected. Vivian stepped in before that silence could help Clara. "She means well," she said with a sad little sigh. "But good intentions and proper training are not the same thing." Denise nodded slowly and began asking questions with too much precision to be casual. Which pills were ever delayed? Had Rosalind missed meals? Who changed linens on overnight shifts? Had Clara ever been left alone to make judgment calls? Nathan didn't have to guess what was happening. It was coach testimony in progress. He drifted backward into the corridor while they spoke, one hand brushing the wall, then paused at the half-open library door. Voices carried better there. A few minutes later, just as he expected, Vivian joined Denise inside under the excuse of taking a phone call. Her tone dropped at once. "You don't need to invent anything outrageous," she murmured. "Just state concern, repeated concern. A pattern of overstepping, inconsistent dosage timing, emotional attachment clouding judgment. Those words matter in court." Denise asked, "And the son?" Vivian gave a tiny laugh. "He'll stare into the middle distance and forget where he is. Leave him to me." Nathan stood completely still, pulse hammering hard enough to make his fingertips warm. Every word was another nail in the case she was building. He wanted to walk in, to speak, to blow the whole performance apart right there. Instead, he did what he had trained himself to do since that first hospital lie. He listened. He memorized. He waited. When he returned to Rosalind's room, Denise was lifting pill bottles one by one, checking labels, snapping photos with her phone. Clara watched with visible discomfort, but did not protest. Rosalind seemed exhausted, confused by the strange woman touching her things. Nathan shuffled to the bedside and sat in the chair by the lamp. Denise smiled at him the way people smile at the damaged. "Do you know what these are for, Mr. Vale?" she asked, holding up 2 tablets and a medicine cup. Nathan looked from one to the other, then toward Clara. It was a test inside a test. He answered softly. "Blue one. Morning?" Clara's eyes widened a little. She had never heard him place a dosage with any accuracy before. Denise noticed that too. Vivian cut in immediately. "He repeats things he hears," she said. "It means nothing." Nathan let his gaze cloud over again, but the moment had landed. Denise tucked that away. By afternoon, the inspection was over, at least on the surface. Denise left with her notes and her polished sympathy. Vivian saw her to the front steps beneath a pale sky and stood outside longer than necessary, speaking in low tones by the stone urns. Clara stayed upstairs, remaking Rosalind's bed because the older woman had spilled broth across the coverlet. Her knuckles were pink from wringing out the stained fabric in hot water. Nathan wandered in at the right moment, sat in the chair by the window, and watched her smooth the fresh blanket. "You should rest your hands," he said, in the uncertain voice she expected from him. Clara gave a tired smile without looking up. "They're used to work." Then she hesitated, glanced toward the closed door, and lowered her voice. "Sir, if anyone asks, I never left your mother alone. Not once." Nathan turned his head slowly, letting confusion veil what he really felt. "Ask what?" Clara pressed her lips together. "Nothing. She stopped, then reached into the apron pocket at her side. "I found this under the medication cart after the nurse left." In her palm lay a single white tablet, unmarked, not from Rosalind's tray, not from any bottle Nathan had seen in that room. Clara looked frightened now, truly frightened. "This wasn't there this morning," she whispered, "and I think someone wanted me not to notice." Clara closed her fingers around the white tablet so fast it almost vanished in her palm. For a second, neither of them moved. The late light coming through Rosalind's curtains turned the dust in the room gold, and somewhere downstairs a clock chimed the half-hour. Nathan kept his face slack, but his mind was racing. Clara leaned closer and lowered her voice to a whisper. "This is wrong," she said. "Your mother doesn't take anything like this." She glanced toward the door, then toward the medicine cart. "I know her pills by sight now. The small blue one for the morning, the scored yellow one at night, the inhaler capsule and foil. This," she swallowed, "this was placed." Nathan looked at the tablet as if he barely understood what he was seeing. "Candy?" he asked. Clara's expression tightened with pain at that word because she suddenly understood how defenseless he looked to people like Vivian. She wrapped the pill in a square of gauze from the bedside tray and slipped it into the pocket of her apron. "Please don't mention it," she whispered. "Not yet." He gave the tiniest nod, the kind a confused patient might give when told to sit still. Clara took Rosalind's empty broth bowl and left the room, carrying fear with her as carefully as she had carried tea and medicine all week. Nathan waited until the corridor went quiet, then crossed to his desk, opened the hidden notebook, and wrote one line under the day's date. Unmarked tablet found beneath medication cart after coached inspection. He underlined the word coached twice. Then he added a second line. Clara recognized every prescribed pill by memory. That mattered more than the trap itself. It told him what kind of woman she was. Not theatrical, not sentimental, competent. The kind of person who paid attention because mistakes had real cost in her world. That evening, he created another small test. He chose it carefully. Nothing dramatic, nothing that could frighten Rosalind. In the downstairs sitting room, where Vivian liked to take calls with a blanket over her knees and a glass of wine at her elbow, Nathan sat at the side table with two pill organizers open in front of him. One held his mild post-accident vitamins and pain tablets. The other was Rosalind's. He pretended to become confused, sliding a few of the wrong tablets into the wrong compartments while staring at them with knitted brows. When Clara came in with a lamp, the light warmed the room, touched the brass picture frames, and fell across the trays. She stopped instantly. "No, sir," she said, setting the lamp down. "Those can't go together." She crossed to him, not flustered, just focused. "This one is yours after food. This one is hers before bed. These never mix." She worked quickly, sorting each tablet back into place with the tip of a clean spoon so she wouldn't touch them too much. Vivian looked up from her phone and sighed. "Must we make a crisis out of every little thing?" Clara kept sorting. "It matters," she said simply. Vivian rolled her eyes and reached for the blue organizer. "We're almost out of those anyway," she said. "Skip tonight's dose and I'll have more brought tomorrow." Clara looked up so sharply that even Nathan felt the change in the air. "Dr. Brenner said not to miss them," she replied. "Mrs. Vale's breathing was bad yesterday." Vivian took a slow sip of wine. "And yet she survived." The sentence landed with a chill so clean it seemed to sharpen the room. Nathan let his hand hover over the tray as if the conversation had drifted past him. Clara did something small but revealing. She did not argue. She picked up the house phone on the side table and said, "Then I'll call the emergency pharmacy and ask if they can release a bridge refill." Vivian stood at once. "Put that down." Clara did. Her fingers trembled only after she set the receiver back. Later, when the house had gone dim and the downstairs lamps were the only islands of light, Nathan heard voices through the half-closed library door. He had wandered there in his robe, barefoot on the runner, playing the part of a restless man who had lost his room again. Inside, Vivian was on speaker with Denise. Ice clinked in a glass. Paper rustled. Denise said, "A preliminary concern is all the court needs." Inconsistent administration. Unlogged substances near the bed. Blurred boundaries with staff. Vivian answered, "Exactly. One undocumented pill, and suddenly she looks reckless." Nathan stopped in the shadow just beyond the doorframe, breath shallow, rage moving through him like heat. So the tablet had not been a guess. It had been bait. A piece placed where Clara would either miss it and look negligent, or find it and still have no way to prove who put it there. He slipped back upstairs before either woman came out, but he didn't return straight to his room. Instead, he went to Rosalind's suite. The bedside lamp was low. The old woman was asleep, her mouth slightly parted, her hands folded over the blanket. Clara sat in the chair beside her with Rosalind's chart in her lap and a pencil tucked behind one ear. Her shoes were off. Her stockings had gone thin at the heel. She looked exhausted. Nathan made just enough noise that she glanced up. "You should be in bed, sir," she said softly. He pointed to the notepad on her lap. "You write everything," he murmured. Clara gave a weary little nod. "I have to."
People forget things when they want to.
Nathan held her gaze a second longer than he should have. The next morning, before breakfast, he found something new on the hall table near the front stairs. A sealed envelope addressed to the probate court, and on the back, in Vivian's sharp handwriting, 3 words: Supplemental care concerns. The envelope lay on the hall table as if it belonged there, calm and ordinary, which made it more dangerous. Nathan slowed his steps and touched the edge of the polished wood like a man orienting himself. The cream paper was thick, legal. The flap had already been sealed. Supplemental care concerns. He didn't need to open it to know what sat inside. Denise's polished observations. Vivian's poison, translated into court language. Clara, recast as careless. Rosalind, recast as neglected. Nathan let his fingers hover over the corner just long enough to feel the raised line of a second folded sheet inside. Then he heard movement from the breakfast room and pulled his hand back. Clara appeared carrying a tray with toast, sliced pear, and Rosalind's morning tea in a covered pot. Her eyes flicked to the envelope, then to Nathan's face. She understood at once that he had seen it. What she did not know was how much. Vivian entered a moment later, already dressed to leave the house, all clean lines and soft cashmere. "There you are," she said brightly. "I was wondering who moved around out here." She picked up the envelope and tapped it lightly against her palm. "Just paperwork for Thursday." Clara stood very still, tray balanced in both hands. Nathan frowned at the paper as though the words on it might have been written in another language. "Thursday?" he asked. Vivian smiled, pleased that he remembered the day, but not the danger. "The court date, darling. We've been over it." Then she turned to Clara with that same sugar-thin voice she used before cutting. "And before you invent any wounded innocence, this has nothing to do with personal feelings. This is about standards." Clara lowered her eyes. "Yes, ma'am." But the answer came out tight. Nathan heard it. She was holding herself together by will alone. The house emptied by noon. Vivian left with the envelope, Denise's number saved in her phone, and 2 garment bags in the back seat because even legal sabotage had to fit around lunch. Rosalind slept after a rough morning. Clara changed the sheets, aired the room, and took a basket of linens down the back stairs. That gave Nathan the window he had been waiting for. He locked his bedroom door, crossed to the old writing desk, and pulled the hidden notebook from behind the travel books. Then he took out something he had not touched since coming home from the hospital. A slim emergency phone, kept off, charged once a week, unknown to Vivienne because it belonged to an old corporate security protocol his father had insisted on years ago. He dialed from memory. Graham Pierce answered on the 3rd ring with the clipped caution of a man who never picked up unknown calls lightly. "Pierce?" Nathan said only, "It's me." Silence, then a breath. "Nathan?" The CFO's voice dropped at once. Good God. Nathan didn't waste time. He spoke low and fast, standing beside the drawn curtains while the house ticked around him. Vivienne had already filed for control. A care complaint was being prepared against Clara. Rosalind was at risk of being removed the moment legal cover existed. He needed layers put in place quietly. Graham listened without interrupting. When Nathan finished, the older man said, "I wondered." The spending reports made no sense. Petty cash disappearing into events, florist invoices, private cars, wine deliveries. I froze what I could without triggering notice. Nathan shut his eyes for 1 second, another piece clicking into place. Good. Now do more. Within 15 minutes, they had a plan. Graham would move emergency care funds into a protected medical trust that could be used only for Rosalind's treatment and in-home support. Operational authority over the resort chain would be split among 3 senior executives instead of sitting where a guardian could reach it in one motion. The old estate house, still emotionally important and financially valuable, would be shielded from any quick sale through a pending preservation review Nathan had the power to request. And one more thing. Nathan asked for a retainer to be set aside under a separate name, enough to cover private counsel and temporary housing for Clara if Vivian succeeded in throwing her out before court. Graham didn't comment on that request. He only said, "I'll make it look routine." Then, more quietly, "Nathan, are you sure about the maid?" Nathan looked toward the ceiling, where Rosalind was sleeping 1 floor above. "She's the only person in this house who protects someone weaker than herself." After the call, Nathan phoned a second person. Not a lawyer from the family firm. Those were too visible. He called Evelyn Shaw, an estates attorney his father had once used in a dispute no one in the household had ever understood. She answered from a car, road noise humming behind her. Nathan gave her the short version, enough to bring her in, not enough to expose everything over a line. She agreed to come that night through the service entrance. "No paper trail sent to the house," she said. "No assistant, no calendar entry." Nathan smiled for the first time that day. "That's why I called you." By evening, the mansion smelled of roasting chicken and furniture polish. Clara served Rosalind in her room, then came down to clear the study where Vivian liked receiving guests. Nathan wandered in as she folded a throw blanket over the arm of the sofa. He pointed vaguely toward the mantel. "Father?" he asked, looking at the framed photograph there. Clara followed his gaze. "Yes," she said softly. "That's him." Nathan kept watching the photo. "Did he shout?" Clara seemed surprised by the question. "No," she said after a moment. "From what your mother told me, he listened first." That answer settled over Nathan more heavily than she knew. A little after 10, when the front of the house was dark and Vivienne was upstairs taking a bath with the bathroom door shut, there was a soft knock at the service entrance. Clara, carrying a basket of folded towels, reached the back hall before Nathan could get there. And when she opened the door, Evelyn Shaw stepped inside, rain on her coat and a briefcase in her hand, just as footsteps began descending from the main staircase. The footsteps from the main staircase were slow at first, then quicker, sharp against the stone floor of the back hall. Clara reacted before Evelyn Shaw had even fully crossed the threshold. She took one look at the briefcase, then at Nathan standing a few yards away in the dim passage, and understood this visitor was not accidental.
"Laundry pickup," she said under her breath with surprising steadiness, and thrust the basket of towels into Evelyn's free arm. The attorney, to her credit, did not blink. She lowered her chin, shifted the briefcase behind the basket, and let Clara lead her toward the service pantry, just as Vivian appeared at the far end of the corridor in a pale robe with wet hair falling over one shoulder. The smell of her expensive bath oil floated ahead of her. "What is going on down here?" she asked. Clara didn't turn around too fast. "The late wash from Mrs. Vale's room," she answered. "The agency sent someone for the extra linen service." Vivian's gaze slid to Evelyn, dismissive and suspicious all at once. "At this hour?" Clara gave the smallest shrug. "They said tomorrow's route was full." Nathan chose that moment to wander one step sideways and touch the wall as if he had lost his bearings again. Vivian's attention snapped to him immediately. "Nathan?" she said, annoyed now. "Why are you out of bed?" He looked toward her voice with that careful emptiness she hated and relied on. "Water," he murmured. The answer was weak enough to satisfy her. She exhaled through her nose, muttered something about incompetent staff, and moved to take his arm. That gave Clara the opening she needed. She slipped Evelyn through the pantry door, shut it softly, and by the time Vivian guided Nathan back toward the main hall, the house looked ordinary again. Or close enough. 10 minutes later, once Vivian had gone back upstairs, Nathan reached the pantry by way of the side corridor. The room smelled of starch, onions from the cool bin, and old wood shelves. A single under-cabinet light cast a warm stripe across Evelyn's face. Clara stood near the door, one hand still on the knob, her breathing quick from nerves. Nathan shut the second door himself and dropped the vacant look in an instant. Evelyn watched the change happen and gave a dry little smile. "Well," she said, "your acting is better than your father's ever was." Clara went completely still. Her eyes moved from Nathan to Evelyn and back again. The basket of towels slipped an inch against her hip. "You remember?" she whispered. Nathan met her gaze directly for the first time since she had entered his life. everything. The word hit her like a physical thing. Her lips parted, but no sound came out at first. Hurt flashed there before reason did. Hurt because every gentle instruction, every careful explanation, every small kindness she had offered this supposedly broken man had been given under a lie. Nathan saw it and felt it sharply. "I know," he said quietly, "you have every right to be angry. But if I had told the truth, she would have changed tactics the same day." Clara swallowed hard. "So all this time?" "I heard what she said in the hospital," he cut in. "About the estate, about control. Since then, I've let her think I was lost." Evelyn opened her briefcase on the narrow counter and began laying out documents with swift, efficient hands. "You can sort out the wounded feelings later," she said. "Right now we have maybe 20 minutes." The work started at once. Evelyn had brought draft instruments already prepared from the call Nathan made earlier. A medical care trust for Rosalind, funded enough to cover in-home specialists, breathing support, and private nursing under providers Nathan approved himself. A temporary shield over the old estate house so no guardian could sell it in a hurry. Corporate control distributed across 3 executives, making any single grab at the resort chain much harder. And one sealed instruction, to be filed if the court moved against him, stating that any attempt to remove Rosalind from the house against her physician's recommendation would trigger immediate review. Nathan signed where needed with a steady hand. Clara stood a step away, still stunned, watching the pen move with none of the hesitation she had come to expect. Then Evelyn drew out one final page. "This one isn't essential for tonight," she said, glancing from Nathan to Clara. "But you asked for it." Nathan took the sheet and placed it on the counter. "It creates a protected stipend and temporary housing access in Clara's name if she's dismissed before the hearing," he said. Clara blinked at him. "What?" "If Vivian pushes you out, you won't be stranded. There'll be enough to cover your room, food, transport, and a lawyer if they try to drag your name through court records." Her face drained of color. "I can't take that." "You may have to," Evelyn said. "This woman is building a record against you." Clara looked down at her raw hands, still marked with red from soap and hot water, and shook her head slowly. "I wasn't staying for money." Nathan's answer came before he could stop its softness. "I know." For a second, the pantry went silent except for the small hum of the refrigerator unit and the ticking of rain beginning again against the service window. Clara's eyes lifted to his, searching now for proof that he meant any of this. Nathan held her gaze. No act, no fog. Just the truth, stripped bare at the worst possible time. It might have pushed her away. It might have made her walk out. Instead, she looked at the documents, then at the door, then back at Rosalind's medication chart still tucked under her arm. "If she finds out before Thursday," Clara said very quietly, "she'll do something reckless." Evelyn nodded once. "That's why she can't." They were almost finished when the house phone on the wall rang. All 3 of them froze. Clara picked up first. "Service hall," she said, trying to sound normal. Vivian's voice came through bright and sharp. "Interesting," she said. "Because I'm standing outside Nathan's bedroom, and he isn't here." Clara's fingers tightened around the receiver, but when she answered, her voice came out remarkably steady. "He came downstairs confused," she said into the phone. "He asked for water and took the wrong hall." Across from her, Evelyn set the basket of towels on a chair and slipped the briefcase behind stacked flour tins in one smooth motion. Nathan lowered his shoulders, let his focus blur, and turned toward the pantry wall as if he no longer knew where the doorway was. Vivian was silent for one long second on the line. Then she said, "Stay there, I'm coming." Clara replaced the receiver with care, though her hand shook afterward. "Inside," she whispered to Evelyn, opening the narrow larder closet beside the pantry shelves. It was barely large enough for coats, mops, and a folded step stool. Evelyn did not complain. She stepped in, closed the door from inside, and left Nathan and Clara alone with the hum of the fridge and the sound of Vivian approaching down the corridor. She appeared almost immediately, robe tied sharply at the waist, damp hair dark against the silk. Her eyes went straight to Nathan, then swept the room in a cold, quick pass. She noticed everything: the second mug on the counter, the basket, the pantry door that hadn't fully latched. "What is this?" she asked. Nathan turned at the sound of her voice with slow, misplaced relief. "Kitchen?" he murmured. Vivian's mouth tightened. "No, darling, not the kitchen." She stepped closer, looked at Clara, and sniffed the air as if she could smell deceit under starch and soap. "Why were you calling from back here?" Clara picked up the empty water glass from the sink. "I'd brought him a drink." "At 10 o'clock at night?" Vivian said. Her gaze shifted past Clara's shoulder and landed on a single dark spot on the tile near the door. Rainwater from Evelyn's coat. Tiny, barely there, but she saw it. Nathan made his move before she could. He pressed one hand to his temple and let his breathing turn ragged. "Mother," he whispered. "Where's my mother?" He said it once, then louder, with real strain in it, because some panic is easy to borrow when your own mother is upstairs and a liar is 2 steps from discovering your last defense. Vivian turned back to him instantly. "Nathan, stop. You're fine." He took one step backward into a stack of folded towels, sending them sliding to the floor. Clara bent as if to catch them, blocking Vivian's path to the half-latched closet for just an instant. "Please," Nathan said again, and this time he let his hand tremble hard enough that Vivian had to choose. Pursue the oddity in the pantry, or preserve the image of the devoted fiancée calming her damaged man. Vanity won. It usually did. She caught his arm and hissed, "All right, come upstairs before you wake the house." Nathan stumbled just enough to be believable. As she guided him away, he saw Clara's eyes flick toward the closet and then back to him. "Stay alive," that glance said. "I'll manage the rest." Vivian did not let him out of her sight for the next half hour. She took him to his room, sat him on the edge of the bed, and questioned him as she brushed his hair back from his forehead in a gesture that would have looked tender on camera. "Did you open any doors downstairs?" she asked. "Did anyone speak to you?" Nathan stared at his own hands. "Water," he repeated. She crouched in front of him. "Listen to me carefully. If staff start filling your head with nonsense, you tell me. You understand?" He nodded after a beat too long. That seemed to calm her a little. Then she stood and did something new. She checked his drawers. Casually at first, then with more purpose. Socks, nightstand, desk tray, the old cufflink box. She was searching for proof that he was less helpless than he looked. Nathan kept his face blank and his pulse steady while she moved around the room. At last, she left, but not before turning in the doorway and saying, "Tomorrow, I'm keeping you with me all afternoon. I don't want you wandering." The lock clicked after she went. For the first time since the accident, she had started to suspect the edges of the act. An hour later, Clara returned. Barefoot now, carrying no lamp, just a small penlight cupped in her palm. She let Evelyn out of the closet and brought her upstairs through the linen passage that connected to Nathan's dressing room. The 3 of them worked in whispers. Nathan signed the remaining pages on the low table by the window while rain stitched itself against the glass. Evelyn reviewed each line softly. Protected medical trust for Rosalind, corporate authorities split across 3 executives, emergency counsel access, Clara's temporary stipend and housing protection if dismissed before the hearing. "This one requires a witness," Evelyn murmured, sliding the page toward Clara. The maid recoiled as if the paper were hot. "I shouldn't be on anything legal." "You already are," Evelyn said. "You just haven't been told." Clara looked at Nathan. There was still hurt in her eyes, but something else had settled beside it now. Understanding, maybe. Or duty. She took the pen, signed where indicated, and handed it back with fingers that still carried the dry roughness of bleach and hot water. When Evelyn finally packed up,
Nathan walked her to the service landing himself. Before she left, she touched the briefcase latch and said, "These filings go out at dawn. Once they're entered, she can scream all she likes." Then she looked at him more closely. "But if she senses even one piece has shifted, she'll get reckless before court." Nathan glanced toward the upper floor, where Rosalind slept and Clara kept watch.
She already is. Evelyn nodded and vanished into the rain. Nathan turned back toward the house. Clara was waiting in the dim corridor, one hand resting on the banister. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Then she said very quietly, "I'm angry that you lied to me." Nathan accepted that without excuse. "I know." She swallowed. "But I'm staying for your mother." He looked at her tired face, the smudge of starch dust on her sleeve, the courage it took just to remain in this place. "That may be the only reason any of us make it through Thursday," he said. Clara gave the faintest nod and started upstairs. At the top landing, she stopped dead. On the carpet outside Rosalind's room sat one of Vivian's pearl earrings, and the bedroom door, which Clara always left slightly open for air, was now completely shut. Clara was the first to move. She bent, picked up the pearl from the carpet, and pushed Rosalind's door open with the back of her wrist. Nathan came up behind her, slower on purpose, until he could safely drop the act inside the room if he had to. The air smelled wrong the moment the door opened. Too sharp. Not the usual lavender cream and chamomile. There was something bitter underneath it, like crushed tablets dissolved in warm water. Rosalind was asleep on her side, breathing deeper than usual, almost heavy. The bedside lamp had been switched off. One drawer of the medicine cart was left half open. Clara crossed to the bed and touched the older woman's shoulder. "Mrs. Vale?" she whispered. No answer. She tried again, this time a little firmer. Rosalind stirred, but only barely. Nathan shut the door behind them. "What is it?" he asked quietly, no fog in his voice now. Clara turned toward him, alarm flashing across her face. "She shouldn't be this hard to wake." Her hands moved fast, expert from repetition. She checked Rosalind's pulse at the wrist, then lifted an eyelid, then smelled the water glass on the nightstand. The glass was half empty. Clara brought it to her nose and grimaced. "Something's in this." Nathan took it and held it under the lamp. A faint, cloudy residue clung to the bottom. Rosalind had not taken any liquid medication that night. They both knew it. Clara opened the top drawer of the cart and counted blister packs with her finger. "One of the night sedatives is missing," she said. "Not from her schedule. From the sample box Denise handled yesterday." Nathan felt the room narrow around that sentence. Clara set the glass aside and reached for the small blood pressure cuff Dr. Brenner had insisted remain in the room after the last breathing episode. The Velcro rasped loudly in the silence. Rosalind's pressure was low, too low for comfort. Nathan stood at the foot of the bed with both hands braced on the rail, his whole body straining against the need to storm across the hall and drag Vivian in by the wrist. Clara looked up at him. "If we call an ambulance right now," she said carefully, "she'll hear it and she'll say I gave your mother the wrong thing." Nathan knew she was right. Vivian had planted the path already. Denise, the court complaint, the envelope. One emergency call at the wrong moment, and Clara would be turned from witness into culprit before sunrise. So they had to move precisely. Nathan said, "Wake her slowly. Keep her sitting up. I'll get Dr. Brenner direct." He crossed to the writing desk in Rosalind's room, took the private contact list from the back of the blotter, and used the old bedside landline instead of his hidden phone. The physician answered groggily, then sharply alert when Nathan identified himself and described the symptoms without embellishment. Sedation, residue in the glass, low pressure, difficulty rousing. Brenner didn't hesitate. "Keep her upright, no more water, cold cloth at the neck. I'm coming myself, and I want that glass untouched." Nathan thanked him and hung up. Clara had already propped Rosalind with extra pillows and was speaking low and steady into her ear. "Stay with me. Small breaths. That's it. Open your eyes for me." Rosalind's lashes fluttered. She managed one weak sound, then sagged again. There was a knock at the door. Both of them froze. Vivian's voice came through soft and sweet enough to make Nathan want to break something. "Is Mother all right? I thought I heard footsteps." Clara wiped her face quickly with the back of her hand and stepped away from the bed. Nathan gave her one look. "I'll handle this." He crossed the room, reopened the door just enough to block the view inside, and let his expression turn vague again by inches. "Can't sleep," he murmured. Vivian looked past his shoulder at once. "You shouldn't be in here upsetting her." Her hair was dry now. She had changed into a cream nightdress and matching wrap, and the remaining pearl earring glimmered at her left ear. Nathan let his gaze drift to it, then away, like a man too damaged to finish a thought. Behind him, Clara kept moving around the bed in careful silence. Vivian tilted her head. "Why is the light on?" Nathan answered with a question of his own, wrapped in confusion. "You came?" It was enough to irritate her and flatter her at the same time. She stepped closer. "Yes, darling, I came to check on you." Then her eyes dropped to his hand. He was still holding the glass. Her expression changed almost invisibly, just a tiny tightening around the mouth. Nathan felt it like a spark. "What's that?" she asked. He stared at the cloudy water as if he'd forgotten where it came from. "Mother drank it." Vivian's gaze flicked toward the bed. "Give it here. It's probably stale." Nathan tightened his grip, not enough to look deliberate, just enough that she had to pause before reaching. Then Clara spoke from behind him. "Dr. Brenner is on his way." Vivian went still. "You called the doctor?" She didn't hide the anger this time. Clara stepped into view, one hand resting lightly on Rosalind's shoulder. Her pressure dropped. "I wasn't taking chances." Vivian turned on her at once. "Without asking me?" Clara's face was pale, but her voice held. "It wasn't your permission I needed." The air in the room changed right there. Something old and brutal showed through Vivian's polished skin. Nathan saw it fully now. So did Clara. Vivian took one step forward, and for the first time since this began, Nathan almost forgot to pretend. "You overstep in every room you enter," Vivian hissed. "First with his papers, then with his mother, and now with doctors in the middle of the night. Do you want them to think this house is unsafe?" A car door slammed outside in the drive. All three of them heard it. Dr. Brenner had arrived, and Vivian's eyes dropped once more to the cloudy glass in Nathan's hand before she forced a smile back onto her face. The smile Vivian forced onto her face was almost convincing, until Dr. Brenner stepped into the room and saw the tension before he saw the patient. He came in carrying a weather-dark coat over one arm and a leather medical case in the other. The cold night air followed him inside, along with the smell of rain and wet gravel from the drive. His eyes moved quickly from Rosalind in bed, to Clara standing pale beside her, to Vivian in silk by the door, and finally to Nathan with the cloudy glass still in his hand. "Tell me exactly what happened," he said. No one interrupted him this time. Clara answered first, clean and direct. Rosalind had been difficult to wake. Her pulse had been slow. The water glass smelled wrong. One sedative from the sample pack was missing. Brenner took the glass from Nathan carefully, held it to the light, and his expression hardened. "No one touches this again," he said. Vivian folded her arms and gave a soft, wounded sigh, already moving into performance. "Doctor, I'm so relieved you came. I've been worried for days that the stress in this house is too much for Rosalind. Clara means well, of course, but she's only one girl and—" Brenner cut her off with a glance. "I'll ask questions in a moment." He turned back to the bed. Clara helped him raise Rosalind a little more while he listened to her breathing, checked her pupils, then her blood pressure again. His jaw tightened at the numbers. "This is sedation," he said flatly. "More than her body should have had." Vivian answered too fast. "Could she have taken the wrong pill herself?" Clara's head lifted at once. "No." It was the strongest word Nathan had heard from her yet. "She doesn't reach the tray without help at night, and I set out only what was due." Brenner looked from one woman to the other. He knew enough to hear the truth sitting between them. Nathan stayed in character, but only halfway now, because too much emptiness would make him useless in front of the doctor. He frowned toward the glass. "Mother's sleepy," he said, as if putting pieces together through fog. Brenner looked at him for a long beat. Then, in a tone so neutral it almost disappeared, he said, "Yes, Nathan. She was given something she should not have had." The doctor could have spoken more gently. He chose not to. That told Nathan something important. Brenner was not fooled by the household story as completely as Vivian hoped. The next half hour was all movement. Brenner phoned for a lab pickup on the glass and requested an urgent toxicology screen through a private facility, instead of routing it through the usual overnight service. He adjusted Rosalind's medication schedule on the spot, marked 2 sample boxes as compromised, and wrote new instructions in thick block letters on the chart so no one could misread them by morning. Clara followed every step, handing over clean syringes, fresh gauze, the pressure cuff, the chart itself. Her hands were steady again now that there was real work to do. Vivian, shut out of the center of the room, kept trying to push herself back in. "Doctor, surely this doesn't need to become official. Elderly patients are fragile. Confusion happens." Brenner sealed the water glass in a specimen bag and said, "Confusion is forgetting a sweater in the car. This is a sedative in a vulnerable woman's drink." That sentence landed like a slap, even without raised volume. Vivian went quiet after that, but Nathan saw the calculation return to her eyes. She was not retreating. She was recalculating. When Brenner finally finished and Rosalind's breathing had steadied enough for the night, he stepped out into the hall with Nathan and Vivian, while Clara remained inside to settle the older woman back under clean blankets. The corridor lamp cast a low amber light over the runner and paneled walls. Brenner spoke in the professional tone that means every word will matter later. "Until I review the lab, I want Rosalind under direct observation. No unsupervised visitors. No extra medication from samples. No food or drink left within reach unless prepared by someone I trust." His eyes went briefly to Clara through the open door, then back to Nathan. "And I want the care chart copied by morning." Vivian's voice softened into injured innocence. "Of course. We all want what's best." Brenner picked up his coat from the banister chair. "Good," he said. "Because if anything like this happens again, I won't be discussing it inside the family." He left. Nathan listened to the front door close downstairs. The house seemed to recoil around the sound. Vivian stood in the corridor beside him for several seconds without speaking. The mask was back on, but it sat badly now. "You should rest," she said at last. "This has been upsetting for you." Nathan turned his head toward her slowly. "Pearl," he murmured. Her fingers flew at once to her ear, where the missing earring should have been. She froze. It was only a word, soft and scattered, easy enough to dismiss as the random association of a damaged man. Unless it wasn't. "What did you say?" she asked. Nathan looked past her shoulder as if he had already lost the thought. "Mother's room," he said. He walked away before she could search his face any longer. He didn't go to bed. Instead, he waited until Clara had settled Rosalind and dinned the room. He met her in the small morning parlor at the end of the hall, where the curtains were half drawn and the silver tea service caught the lamp in cold glints. Clara looked exhausted. There were crescents under her eyes, and one loose strand of hair had escaped and stuck to her cheek. Nathan spoke first. "She knows I saw the earring." Clara closed the door quietly behind her. "Then we don't have much time." He nodded. "Brenner's report may help, but it won't stop her before Thursday." Clara looked toward Rosalind's room, then back at him. "What stops her?" Nathan's answer came without hesitation. A mistake she can't explain away in public. Before Clara could respond, footsteps sounded downstairs, followed by the front door opening again. At this hour, there should have been no one else coming into the house. They heard Vivian's voice carry up from the foyer, warm and welcoming now, saying, "Thank you for coming so late, Denise. I think we have a new situation to document." The moment Denise's name floated up from the foyer, Clara's face changed. It was the look of someone who understood exactly how fast a lie could harden into a record if the right witness arrived at the right hour. Nathan stepped closer to the parlor door and listened. Below them, the front hall carried every sound upward. The soft scrape of Denise's suitcase wheels over stone, Vivian's low, urgent voice, the rustle of a coat being removed. "I'm sorry to drag you out this late," Vivian was saying, all velvet now. "But after what happened tonight, I don't feel safe leaving the household notes in just anyone's hands." Clara shut her eyes for 1 second, then opened them. "She's going to rewrite the whole night before morning," she said. Nathan nodded once. "Then we get there first." They moved quickly. Clara went straight to Rosalind's room and copied Dr. Brenner's new orders exactly, line for line, onto fresh paper from the writing desk so the original chart could remain by the bed untouched. Her handwriting was neat despite the hour. Nathan watched her as he crossed to his room, lifted the false bottom of an old Vale drawer, and slid the hidden notebook into the inner pocket of a wool housecoat. He added 3 new entries standing up, the pen biting harder than usual into the page. Missing sedative. Pearl outside mother's door. Brenner. This is sedation. No flourish, no commentary, facts only. Then he tore a single blank page from the back and folded it twice. He had an idea now. Risky, but clean. When he returned to the upper hall, Clara was pinning the copied medical instructions to the inside panel of Rosalind's room divider so they would be visible from the bed and impossible to misplace without being noticed. "Good," Nathan said. Clara looked at him, still tired, still hurt, but fully aligned now. "If Denise comes up," she said, "Vivian will want me flustered or defensive." Nathan leaned one shoulder against the wall, thinking, "Don't defend yourself first. Stay with my mother. Make them step around care if they want to attack you." Clara studied him a beat and gave the smallest nod. "And you?" He held up the folded blank page. "I'm going to forget something on purpose." Downstairs, Vivian had settled Denise into the blue sitting room, where she preferred to host private conversations that needed to sound respectable. Nathan knew the room well. Deep chairs, low lamps, expensive rugs that deadened footsteps, and a cabinet stocked with sherry no one drank except guests who wanted to feel grand. By the time he wandered into the hall outside it, he had returned fully to the role. Slower blink, slight drag in the step. That faint, unfinished confusion that invited people to speak more freely than they should. He stopped just beyond the threshold and let his hand rest against the doorframe. Inside, Vivian was talking fast. "Brenner overreacted," she said. "He walked into a maid running the room like a ward nurse and assumed competence where there isn't any. I need your note to reflect instability in the care environment." Denise made a small, doubtful sound. "If the lab shows a sedative," Vivian cut in, "then it shows access, not source." Nathan let the folded paper slip from his hand. It floated just inside the doorway and landed face down on the rug. Denise noticed first. "Nathan?" she said. Vivian's voice changed instantly. "Darling, what are you doing out of bed?" He looked toward the sound, then down at the page as if surprised it existed. "Found a letter," he murmured. "For Mother?" He bent too slowly to pick it up. Vivian reached him first and lifted the paper. It was blank, of course, but that wasn't the point. The point was to draw her out in front of Denise, to make her choose between patience and contempt. She unfolded it, saw nothing, and for 1 sharp second her face broke. "There is nothing on this paper," she hissed under her breath. Nathan blinked at her, then at the page. Gone? He asked. Denise was watching closely now. Vivian recovered, but not completely. He fixates, she said to Denise. Sometimes he thinks a page is a memory. That would have been a graceful line if she had spoken it gently. Instead, it came out clipped, irritated, almost mocking. Nathan let his gaze travel to Denise and linger there as though searching her face. Nurse, he said softly. You hide pills. Silence. Tiny, electric silence. Clara would have heard it from upstairs if the house had held its breath any harder. Denise's head snapped toward Vivian. Vivian laughed too quickly. See, this is what I mean. He absorbs fragments and spits them back in nonsense form. Nathan touched his temple and frowned, acting as if the thought hurt him. White one, he whispered. Under cart. Denise stood up. It wasn't a dramatic movement, just enough to shift the room. What does he mean? She asked. Vivian smiled with all her teeth. He means nothing. He's ill. Nathan let his shoulders fold inward, then asked in a small voice, Did I do wrong? It was a cruel question to ask in that tone because it forced them both into the mirror. Denise looked uncomfortable now, truly uncomfortable. She had entered the house to give language to Vivian's claims. She was suddenly sitting across from a man who might be impaired, might be dangerous to rely on, but had just echoed a detail no one had spoken in front of him. Vivian stepped closer to Nathan and took his elbow. Too tight. Come upstairs, she said. You're exhausted. He allowed himself to be turned, but before leaving he looked back once at Denise and said, almost dreamily, Mother drank the wrong sleep. Denise did not answer. Back in the corridor, Vivian kept her smile fixed until the sitting room door closed behind them. Then she dropped it. Her nails pressed into Nathan's sleeve hard enough to pinch. What exactly did Clara tell you? She whispered. Nathan let his head tilt. Clara? He gave her the same empty question he had given a dozen times before. She stared at him, searching. He could feel the suspicion working now, not fully formed, but alive. Somewhere below, the old grandfather clock began striking midnight, each note slow and heavy through the house. Vivian released his arm. Fine, she said coldly. If you're going to wander, you'll do it where I can see you tomorrow. She turned away and went back into the sitting room. Nathan did not follow. Instead, he moved one step into shadow beside the staircase and waited. Less than a minute later, Denise came out alone with her handbag on her shoulder and her mouth set in a hard line. She did not look toward him. She walked straight to the front door as if she wanted distance from the house more than money from Vivienne. For one hopeful beat, Nathan thought the crack had opened at exactly the right time. Then the door to the study clicked open behind him. Vivian's brother Marcus, who was supposed to arrive only on the morning of the hearing, stepped inside carrying an overnight bag and said, You sounded rattled on the phone. Tell me the maid hasn't become a problem already. Marcus's voice had the same polished edge as his sister's, but none of her finesse. He was louder, heavier in his movements, the kind of man who filled a doorway before he entered it. Nathan stayed in the shadow beside the staircase and let his face go slack again. From where he stood, he could see only part of the study through the cracked door, but he could hear every word. Vivian gave a short, irritated exhale. The maid is becoming inconvenient, she said. And Nathan is less predictable than I'd like. Marcus dropped his overnight bag with a dull thud. Then stop letting the girl orbit the old woman. If the care setup looks unstable, the judge won't need much. Vivian lowered her voice, but not enough. Brenner complicated things. He's ordered direct observation. Marcus snorted. Then make the observation look like panic, sloppiness, emotional overreach. You don't need a crime, Viv. You need doubt. Upstairs, Clara had not moved from the parlor doorway. Nathan glanced back at her once. She understood from his expression alone that someone new had arrived, and the house had just become more dangerous. He lifted one hand slightly, a stay-back gesture,
then stepped into the open just enough for the floorboard beneath him to creak. The study went quiet at once. Vivian appeared in the hall 2 seconds later, Marcus behind her, broad-shouldered and already smiling the smile of a man who thought he knew what room he was in. "Nathan," Vivian said smoothly, "you're still awake." Nathan turned toward her voice as if surfacing from a dream. Marcus looked him up and down with open appraisal, then said, "Poor guy." He said it the way some people say damaged furniture. Nathan hated him instantly. Vivian came closer and touched Nathan's sleeve. "This is my brother Marcus. He's here to help with the hearing arrangements." Marcus extended a hand out of reflex, then seemed amused when Nathan didn't take it. "So, this is the famous memory problem," he said. Nathan looked straight past him. "You smell like smoke," he murmured. Marcus's grin faded a fraction. He did smell like smoke. Expensive cigars and rain. Vivian cut in quickly. "He says odd things when he's overtired." Marcus recovered and laughed. "Guess he's got something left upstairs after all." Nathan let his head tilt, as if the phrase meant nothing. But inside, he stored Marcus away at once. Not subtle, probably reckless. Exactly the kind of ally Vivian would use when patience ran out. The rest of the night passed under watch. Marcus took the guest suite nearest the main stairs instead of the far wing, which meant he wanted to stay close to the center of the house. Vivian made a little show of checking on Nathan twice before bed, then once again near 1 in the morning, as if she couldn't bear to leave him alone after such a stressful evening. Nathan responded with sleepy confusion every time. Clara stayed in Rosalind's room with a folded blanket over the armchair and the copied care chart beside the lamp. No one said so aloud, but everyone understood the same thing. If anything happened before dawn, there would be 4 witnesses in the house, and 2 of them were liars. Morning arrived gray and close, with low clouds pressing against the windows and the smell of wet leaves drifting in whenever a door opened. Nathan came downstairs late by design and found the breakfast room already occupied. Marcus was at the table with black coffee, a half-eaten croissant, and Rosalind's medical chart in his hands. Clara stood by the sideboard, frozen in place, while Vivian buttered toast she wasn't eating. Nathan's pulse jolted once, hard. Marcus looked up and smiled lazily. "Morning, cousin." Vivian corrected him without warmth. "Fiancée." Marcus shrugged. "Close enough." Then he tapped the chart with one blunt finger. "Interesting reading. Lots of notes for a maid." Clara stepped forward at once. "That should stay upstairs." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "Should it?" The paper made a dry crackle in his hand. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like a staff member who got very attached and started playing nurse." Vivian said nothing. That silence was permission. Nathan moved toward the table with measured slowness, rubbing 2 fingertips against the wood edge of a chair as though grounding himself. He stared at the chart and asked, "Mother's book?" Clara's eyes flicked to him. She saw it immediately. He was giving her an opening. "Yes, sir," she said, catching on. "Your mother's book, for her doctor." Marcus smirked. "Hear that? Even he knows it isn't yours." Then, as if he'd just thought of something clever, he lifted the chart and sniffed it. "Smells like that cheap hand cream she uses, too." Clara flushed deep red. Not anger first, humiliation. The room held it. The scrape of china, the small hiss from the coffee urn. Even Vivian looked slightly annoyed at Marcus for making the cruelty so obvious. Nathan kept the fog on his face, but his jaw tightened. Clara reached again for the chart. "Please give that back." Marcus did not. "Or what?" he asked softly. "You'll write down that my breathing changed?" Vivian laughed under her breath at that. The sound did something final inside Nathan. He could tolerate greed. He could even tolerate vanity for a while if it served the trap. But contempt for decent work? That had a way of clarifying everything. He chose that moment to make his own move. Nathan reached past Marcus, not for the chart, but for the sugar bowl.
His hand hit the coffee cup instead. Hot black coffee sloshed across the white tablecloth, over Marcus's wrist, and onto the chart. Marcus swore and shot to his feet. Clara lunged for the papers before the spill could soak through. Vivian stood so fast her chair legs shrieked against the floor. "Nathan!" she snapped. He recoiled at once, shoulders folding, face gone blank with alarm. "Burned," he whispered, looking at Marcus's reddening hand as if he didn't understand how it happened. Clara blotted the chart with a clean napkin, but one page had already turned translucent at the edges. Marcus cursed again and yanked his hand away. "What is wrong with him?" Vivian rounded on Clara instantly. "Why was he carrying hot coffee near him?"
I told you to keep sharp things, hot things, anything risky away when he's confused. Clara stared at her in disbelief. "I didn't pour it. You were standing right there," Vivian shot back. Then Marcus, still furious, made the mistake Nathan had been waiting for without even knowing it. He grabbed the damp chart from Clara's hands, shook it once, and snapped. "Forget the old woman's blood pressure. The problem is this house lets servants think they matter." The breakfast room door was open. In that doorway, unnoticed until that exact second, stood Dr. Brenner, holding the printed lab result from the glass. Dr. Brenner entered like a man carrying a verdict. Rain still clung to the shoulders of his coat, and the paper in his hand was damp at one corner where his fingers had pressed too hard. Marcus straightened slowly, the ruined chart still in his grip. Vivian's face changed first to surprise, then to that careful sorrow she used whenever she needed innocence to arrive before the truth. Clara didn't move at all. She was still standing beside the sideboard with the coffee spill creeping toward her cuff, her hands tense at her sides. Nathan stayed where he was, shoulders slightly hunched, the perfect image of a man too fogged to understand the weight that had just entered the room. Brenner looked at the wet chart in Marcus's hand, then at the breakfast mess, then at each face in turn. "Interesting timing," he said. No one answered. He lifted the paper. "The preliminary screen from the glass is back. The drink contained a concentrated sedative from the exact class I told this household not to leave unsecured." Marcus opened his mouth, but the doctor cut across him without even raising his voice. "Not now." He turned to Clara. "Was Rosalind given anything outside the written schedule after I left?" Clara answered at once. "No." Brenner nodded once, as though that matched what he expected. Then he faced Vivian. "The sample pack I marked as compromised is missing another tablet this morning. I counted it myself before I came down." That shifted the room. Vivian blinked slowly. "Doctor, surely you're not implying—" "I am stating facts," he said. "Someone accessed medication that did not belong in that woman's water. Someone did so after I warned this house explicitly." Marcus gave a short, ugly laugh. "Or the maid lost control of the trays and now everyone's scrambling to cover it." Brenner finally looked at him directly. "And you are?" "Family," Marcus said. Brenner's expression did not change. "Then act like it." The insult landed clean. Nathan saw Marcus's neck redden at once. Vivian recovered faster. She always did. "No one here wants conflict," she said, laying a hand against her chest as if she were the one under attack. "But if the lab proves a sedative was given, then we have to consider who had physical access to Rosalind all night. Clara practically lives in that room." Clara's lips parted, but before she could speak, Rosalind's service bell rang upstairs. Once. Weak, but urgent. Every head in the room lifted. Clara moved on instinct. "Her morning inhaler's due," she said, already stepping away from the sideboard. Vivian pounced immediately. "Stay here. We are discussing a serious matter." Clara stopped, caught between accusation and duty, and Nathan saw the exact moment the test presented itself. He had not planned it this way, but there it was. Clara looked not at Brenner, not at Vivian, but toward the ceiling, toward Rosalind. "If she misses the inhaler window, her chest tightens," she said quietly. Marcus scoffed. "Hear that? She's already giving orders." Clara swallowed. "I'm telling you what your mother needs." "Your mother." Brenner noticed it too. Nathan could see it in the doctor's eyes. Vivian heard it and hated it. "You don't leave this room until we settle what happened," she snapped. Clara made her choice. She walked past them. Just with the steady urgency of someone who knew an old woman upstairs could not breathe on schedule alone. Marcus actually caught her elbow. "Did you miss the part where we're talking to you?" he said. Clara flinched, but did not turn around. "Mrs. Vale comes first." There it was, plain, unadorned. She did not protect herself first. She protected Rosalind. Brenner stepped between them so quickly, Marcus had to let go. "Take your hands off her," the doctor said. His voice was still calm. That made it worse. Clara slipped free and left the room, her footsteps already on the stairs before Vivian found a new expression to wear. Nathan lowered himself into the nearest chair and let his breathing roughen, because if he did not act now, Vivian would fire Clara before lunch. "Where'd she go?" he asked, staring after the stairwell as though suddenly lost again. Vivian turned to him at once. "Nathan, sit still." He gripped the armrests. "Mother, medicine?" Brenner watched him carefully now, not fooled, perhaps not fully informed, but no longer willing to accept the house script without question. Marcus muttered, "This is exactly why the place is chaos." Vivian took the opportunity immediately. "Doctor, for Rosalind's safety, I think Clara should be removed from her care until after the guardianship hearing, at least temporarily. Emotions are clearly too involved." Nathan let his head jerk toward her voice with just enough alarm to make it plausible. "No," he said. It was soft, but immediate. Vivian froze. Marcus frowned. Brenner said nothing. Nathan stared at the tablecloth, at the spreading coffee stain, at the sugar crystals glittering near the spoon. Then he spoke again, haltingly, as if dragging the thought through mud. "She knows Mother's pills, my room, the bell." He pressed one hand to his temple and added, "Don't send away." Vivian's expression hardened despite herself. "Darling, you don't understand what's best right now." Nathan lifted his eyes to her face, and there was just enough raw fear in them to unsettle everyone in the room. "Then tell me," he whispered, "why the wrong sleep keeps finding Mother." For one dangerous second, nobody moved. Brenner folded the lab paper and slipped it back into his coat pocket. "Clara stays in Rosalind's room," he said, "until I say otherwise." Marcus started protesting immediately. Vivian tried a gentler route. "Doctor, that is highly irregular." "So is a sedative in a fragile woman's water," Brenner replied. "I'll return this afternoon with a private aid of my choosing. Until then, nothing changes." That was not the victory Nathan ultimately needed, but it bought time. And time was blood in this house. Brenner left soon after, carrying the damaged chart copy Clara had made and promising a formal note before noon. Marcus cursed under his breath the moment the doctor was gone. Vivian said nothing at all. She only stood very still beside the breakfast table, eyes on Nathan in a way they had never been before. Measuring. By midday, the mansion had gone eerily quiet again. Clara remained upstairs with Rosalind, exactly where Brenner ordered. Marcus retreated to the study to make angry phone calls. Vivian disappeared into Nathan's wing under the excuse of finding him a fresh sweater after the coffee spill. Nathan gave her 3 full minutes before slipping into his room through the dressing passage. The desk drawer was open, the travel books had been moved, and the hidden notebook was gone. For 1 full second, Nathan could only stare at the empty gap behind the row of travel books. The shelf looked almost unchanged. That was the cruel part. The leather-bound atlases were upright, the brass bookends still angled toward the lamp, the blotter square on the desk. But he knew this room the way a man knows his own pulse. The books had been pushed back in the wrong order. The drawer had not been left open by accident. Someone had searched carefully and found what mattered. He shut the drawer at once, smoothed his expression, and crossed to the armchair just as footsteps sounded in the hall. When the door opened, he was already seated,
turning a fountain pen cap over in his fingers like a man fascinated by a simple object. Vivian entered without knocking. She held a slim stack of folded papers in one hand and a soft gray sweater in the other. The sweater was theater. The papers were war. "There you are," she said lightly. "I've been looking everywhere." Nathan lifted his head with the slow, empty curiosity he had perfected. "Cold," he murmured. "I brought this for you," she said, laying the sweater across his knees. Then she looked at the desk, at the shelf, at him. "And while I was tidying up, I found something very interesting." She let the papers tap once against her palm. Nathan felt his body go still inside, though outwardly he only blinked. She crossed to the window and unfolded the top page. Nathan caught a glimpse of his own handwriting before she turned it slightly away. Just pages, torn out or separated, enough to hurt. "At first," Vivian said, "I thought perhaps Clara had been making notes for you. You know, little memory exercises, where your things are, which room is which, that sort of thing." She glanced back with a smile too polished to trust. But then I read a line that said, "She grieved the inconvenience before she asked whether I would live." She let the paper lower an inch.
That doesn't sound like furniture placement, does it? Nathan let confusion gather slowly on his face, as if the words meant nothing and everything at once. He reached out one hand toward the papers and said, "Mine?" Vivian watched him closely now. Every twitch mattered, every breath. "That's what I'm asking you," she replied. "Are these yours?" He stood up too fast on purpose, let his knee bump the side table, and winced as if the sudden movement had knocked his thoughts loose. "Words run away," he said. "Sometimes I catch them." Vivian narrowed her eyes. He could see the suspicion burning hotter. She wasn't sure whether she had discovered evidence of his intact mind or the sad scratchings of a damaged man trying to pin down a slippery world. So he leaned harder into the latter. Nathan took one of the loose pages from her hand before she could stop him. His own writing stared back at him. Dates, fragments, names. Dangerous in the right light. He ran his thumb over the ink and frowned. "Blue room," he said softly, inventing as he went. "Kitchen. Mother's bell. Vivian is the nice lady." The last phrase he delivered with such guileless effort that even Vivian blinked. He looked up at her, almost pleading. "If I write it down, it stays longer." Then he lowered his gaze to the page and whispered, "Did I write you wrong?" That question did what he hoped. It hit her vanity before it hit her logic. The edge in her face eased, but only a little. "You poor thing," she said, and the pity in her voice was false enough to leave a taste in the air. "You're trying to remember, that's all." Nathan let his shoulders sag in relief, so visible it almost hurt to perform. Vivian collected the pages from his hand and folded them back together. "You should have told me," she said. "I could have helped you." He almost laughed at that, but instead he stared past her shoulder and asked, "Did I say Mother was thirsty?" Vivian's mouth twitched. "No, darling, you didn't." She slipped the pages into her robe pocket. Not back on the shelf, pocket. That told him everything. She was keeping them, studying them, weighing what they meant. There was a knock at the half-open door. Clara. She stood there with a tray balanced carefully in both hands. Broth for Rosalind, fresh water, 2 pill cups, folded gauze. Her eyes moved from Nathan to Vivienne, and then, briefly, to the pocket where the papers had disappeared. She understood more than he wanted her to. "Mrs. Vale is asking for him," she said quietly. Vivienne turned with instant annoyance. "He isn't leaving this room right now." Clara didn't retreat. She asked twice. That tiny detail mattered. Rosalind only called twice when she was frightened. Nathan took one step toward the door. Vivian's voice snapped like thread. "Stay!" He stopped, then put a hand to his temple and frowned. "Mother waiting?" Clara answered before Vivienne could. "Yes." The maid was pale from lack of sleep. her hair pinned in a hurry, one cuff damp from washing. Yet even now, with her own name at risk, she was here because Rosalind had called. Vivian saw that too, and hated it. "Fine," she said coldly. "Take him. But only for 5 minutes." Clara nodded once. Nathan followed her into the hall, keeping the act in place until the bedroom door closed behind them. Rosalind was awake now, thin hands worrying the blanket, face still washed out from the sedative. Clara set the tray down and adjusted the pillows with gentle efficiency. Nathan stood by the bed, silent for a moment, then looked to Clara. "She found part of it," he said under his breath. Clara's hand stopped. "The notebook?" He gave the smallest nod. Worry crossed her face at once, but there was no accusation in it, only calculation. "Does she know?" "Not yet." Clara exhaled slowly, then resumed stirring the broth so it would cool evenly. "Then she'll strike before she's sure." As if summoned by the thought, Marcus's voice rose from the corridor outside. He wasn't trying to keep it down anymore. "I'm telling you, move the mother out before the hearing," he said. "If she's in a facility by morning, the maid loses her stage, the doctor loses his drama, and you walk into court looking responsible." The handle of Rosalind's door began to turn. The handle turned halfway, then stopped as Clara moved faster than Nathan had ever seen her move. She set the broth tray down on the dresser with a quick clink of porcelain, crossed the room, and opened the door herself before Marcus could push in. He stood there with Vivian just behind him, both of them wearing the same thin version of concern people use when they've already decided what story they want. "We heard voices," Marcus said, trying to peer past Clara into the room. "Rosalind needs quiet," Clara answered. Not rude, not soft, just firm enough to block the opening with her body. Vivian tilted her head. "I was coming to check on her." Clara did not move. She's settled now. Nathan stood by the bed with one hand resting on the rail, his posture still loose and uncertain, but inside he was taking the measure of everything. Marcus wanted force, Vivian wanted cover, and Rosalind, pale against the pillows, looked frightened enough already. Then Marcus said the one thing that made the moment tip. "Good," he replied, "because the transfer team can be here within the hour." Clara blinked as if she had misheard him. Vivian did not correct him. Nathan felt the room tighten around that silence. "Transfer?" Clara asked. Marcus folded his arms. "A private care facility. Temporary, of course. Quiet environment, skilled staff, no more household confusion." Rosalind made a weak sound from the bed, one hand lifting an inch from the blanket before falling back. Nathan stepped closer to his mother at once, still in character outwardly, but unable to hide the protectiveness in the movement itself. Vivian saw it, Clara saw it, Marcus did too, and mistook it for panic he could use. "See," he said, gesturing toward Nathan, "he can't handle this setup. The old woman can't either. You should be thanking us." Clara turned then toward Rosalind. "Mrs. Vale," she said gently, kneeling by the bed so the older woman could see her face. "Do you want to leave your room right now?" Rosalind's lips trembled. She managed a tiny shake of the head. It was barely a movement, but it was real. Vivienne spoke immediately, too quickly. "She's confused." Clara looked up. "She understood me." Marcus scoffed. "A nod from a sedated woman isn't consent." "Neither is a van at the door," Clara shot back. That landed harder than she meant it to, because Nathan heard it too. A van. Marcus hadn't said ambulance. He hadn't said medical transport. He had said transfer team, and he said it like a man ordering furniture removed before guests arrived. Nathan's blood went cold. They had already arranged this. Why everyone else was scrambling over charts and poisoned water and court notes, Vivian had been lining up a bargain home and transport behind the scenes. His mother was not a patient to them. She was a problem to be moved out of frame. Marcus stepped into the room despite Clara's stance, forcing her to move or be shoved. She moved only enough to keep him from brushing the bed. "You don't get a vote here," he said.
Actually, Nathan said softly, she does. The words slipped out before he could stop them, clearer than they should have been, smarter. Marcus turned at once. Vivian's face changed. Nathan lowered his eyes and touched the blanket edge, as if the sentence had taken more from him than it really had. She knows Mother's room, he added, deliberately roughening the rest. Marcus laughed. This is absurd. Vivian stepped in quickly, trying to smooth over what she had heard. Nathan is upset. We all are. Which is why we need structure. She pulled a folded document from her pocket and handed it toward Clara with 2 fingers, as though passing a receipt to a waitress. Here, written notice. Until after the hearing, you are suspended from making independent care decisions. A licensed outside team will take over. Clara did not take the paper. Instead, she said, Dr. Brenner ordered direct observation, not removal. Vivian smiled. Dr. Brenner does not run this house. Nathan looked at the paper. If it was real, then Marcus's arrival had not been an improvisation. If it was fake, they were bluffing with the confidence of people who expected no one to challenge them before court. Clara finally accepted the document, but only to read it. Her lips moved once over the heading. Interim Household Directive. No hospital logo, no medical signature. Just Vivian's name typed in full, and Marcus's initials at the bottom as witness. A house order, nothing more. Clara exhaled, very slowly, and folded it back along the crease. This doesn't override a physician's instruction, she said. For the first time, Marcus lost his easy smirk. He hadn't expected resistance framed in plain, correct terms. Down below, somewhere near the front drive, an engine idled. All 4 of them heard it. Vivian did not look startled. That was the worst part. She looked relieved. They're early, she said. Rosalind's breathing sped up at once. Clara reached for her hand. Nathan stepped fully between the bed and the doorway now, whatever remained of the act held together only by habit. Marcus looked at him with blunt irritation. Move. Nathan didn't. No. This time the word was clean, not confused, not delayed, just no. A dangerous silence followed. Vivian's pupils narrowed. She had heard it too clearly. Clara looked at Nathan in alarm, but there was no time to take the word back. Marcus took another step. Clara rose with him, placing herself just off Nathan's shoulder, not behind him. Equal risk, equal refusal. If you force her out in this condition, she said, I will tell Dr. Brenner exactly what happened and exactly when. Marcus gave a low laugh. And who do you think anyone will believe? The chart, Clara said. The lab, the doctor, Mrs. Vale herself if you stop talking over her. Rosalind made another sound, louder this time, and managed to whisper a single word through dry lips. Stay. Clara squeezed her hand. Nathan closed his eyes for half a second. That one word was enough to steady him. A knock came from downstairs. Not the polite tap of a visitor, the firm, official rap of someone who expected the door to be opened immediately. Marcus frowned. Who now? A second knock followed, even louder, and from the hall below, the butler's replacement called up nervously. Miss Vivian, there are court papers at the door. They say they're for Mr. Nathan Vale, and they need a signature today. The knock from downstairs broke the standoff just long enough for everyone to show what kind of creature they really were. Marcus swore under his breath. Vivian's eyes flashed with instant irritation, not fear. Clara looked from the door to Rosalind, then back to Nathan. Rosalind herself lay stiff in the bed, breathing shallowly, her fingers still twisted in the blanket after whispering that single word, stay. Nathan had no idea yet whether the papers at the door were Evelyn's work reaching the house at the perfect time or some new complication with worse timing than anything else this week. But he knew one thing. If Marcus and Vivian got Rosalind out before those papers were opened, the battlefield would change under everyone's feet. I'll see to it, Vivian said at last, already turning away from the bedroom door. No, Marcus said, stepping back into the hall. You stay here. If transport's outside, I want this settled before your process server becomes another delay. That one phrase told Nathan more than Marcus realized. Your process server. So they understood immediately that legal papers arriving in person were dangerous. Vivian hesitated for just a fraction, then nodded. Fine. Don't let him speak to anyone alone. Marcus gave her a tight grin and headed down the stairs. The moment he disappeared from view, Clara shut Rosalind's door fully and turned the key in the lock. It was the first openly defiant move she had made in the house. Vivian heard it and spun around. What do you think you're doing? Clara stood in front of the door, one hand still on the key. Her face was pale, but her voice did not shake. Following Dr. Brenner's order, no unsupervised visitors. Vivian took one step toward her. You do not lock me out of this room. Nathan moved before either woman could say more and placed himself between them. Not boldly enough to shatter the act, but enough to slow the collision. Too loud, he murmured, one hand pressed to his temple. Vivian stared at him. She could feel control slipping, and it made her ugly. Downstairs, the front door opened. A man's voice carried up, formal and clear. Personal service for Mr. Nathan Vale. Marcus answered with bluster. He's not receiving. The stranger did not retreat. Court order, signature required or recorded refusal. Nathan felt something almost like gratitude toward whoever was standing on that porch in the rain. Marcus hated procedure. Procedure was exactly what this house needed. Vivian heard it too. Her whole body sharpened. She stepped back from Clara and smiled at Nathan with that poisonous softness she used when she wanted him obedient. Darling, why don't you go downstairs with Marcus and sign whatever it is? Then we can all focus on your mother. Nathan looked toward her voice slowly. Sign? He let the word hang, letting uncertainty do its work. Vivian nodded as if talking to a child. Yes, just your name. Nice and easy. Clara's head snapped toward her. Everyone in the house knew what signature questions meant now. Nathan had dodged them before. Vivian knew that too. She was testing whether this new pressure would force his hand. He answered in the only way that would keep the trap alive. Nathan lowered himself into the chair by Rosalind's bed and let his fingers twitch against the armrest. Handshakes, he said softly. Bad when people watch. Vivian's jaw tightened. Clara did not speak, but Nathan felt the relief in the room anyway. Then, from below, Marcus called up impatiently, Vivian, it's Shaw and Pierce. That changed everything. Evelyn Shaw, Graham Pierce. They had come in person. Vivian's face drained in a quick, draining ripple that she could not hide. Clara saw it and understood only that these names mattered. Nathan understood more. Evelyn would not come lightly. Graham would never step into the house unless the matter was already too serious for distance. Vivian recovered fast, but not fast enough. Stay here, she hissed to Nathan, then to Clara, and if you think locking that door protects you, think again. She swept out of the room, silk whispering against the carpet, and hurried down the stairs. Nathan stood at once. Clara looked at him. Go, she whispered. I'll stay with her. Rosalind's eyes were open now, cloudy but aware enough to follow his face. He touched her hand once. I'll be back. Then he moved to the landing, keeping to the wall, mask returning as he descended. Halfway down, he could already hear the clash in the foyer. Evelyn stood just inside the front door in a dark coat, still wet from the weather, a legal portfolio under one arm. Graham Pierce beside her looked like a man who had slept in his suit and driven through 3 storms. Marcus blocked the hall with both arms spread, red-faced and loud. You don't come into a private residence waving papers like a raid, he snapped. Graham did not flinch. Then stop behaving like we're interrupting a theft, he said. Nathan almost smiled. Evelyn raised a document toward the hall light. Emergency filing confirmations, she said. Medical trust registration, estate protections, and notice of limited authority. Mr. Vale must receive them directly. Vivian descended the last steps just then and cut into the scene with a bright, false laugh. This is absurd. Nathan isn't competent to review anything unscheduled.
Evelyn turned her head slowly and looked at Vivian the way a surgeon looks at infection. "Competency is for the court to determine tomorrow," she said. "Today, he can accept service." Graham added, "And for the record, our office has also received your supplemental care complaint. We'll be addressing that too." The foyer went dead still. Marcus glanced over his shoulder and saw Nathan on the staircase. For half a second, no one moved. Then Marcus smiled, and Nathan knew instantly he had found his next weapon. "Perfect," he said, too pleasantly. "Bring him down. Let him sign everything in front of witnesses. Right now." Vivian turned fast. "Marcus?" "No," he cut in louder. "Enough delays. If his hand shakes, we'll all see it. If his mind wanders, Shaw can take that back to court with her." He looked straight up at Nathan. "Come on, cousin. Show us what you can do." And in the silence that followed, Graham Pierce, who knew Nathan's real signature better than anyone alive outside a bank, lifted his eyes to the staircase, too.
Graham Pierce did not speak right away, and that silence was more dangerous than anything Marcus had said. He stood in the foyer with rain still shining on his shoulders, one gloved hand holding the envelope Evelyn had brought, the other resting at his side like a man forcing himself not to react. Nathan could feel the weight of that old loyalty from halfway up the stairs. Graham knew his signature. He knew the angle of the N, the pressure on the V, the tiny hitch in the last stroke when Nathan was tired or annoyed. If Marcus forced a signature test in front of him, the room could explode before Nathan chose the moment. Vivienne sensed it too. Her posture tightened. Marcus, blind with arrogance, mistook that silence for fear. "Well," Marcus called up the stairs, "your people want ink. Come give it to them." Nathan let one hand slide along the banister, steadying himself as though the descent itself required concentration. He took it slowly, too slowly for Marcus's taste. By the time he reached the last step, Evelyn had already angled the papers so only Nathan could see the first page. Filing receipt. Trust protections accepted. Good. At least that much had landed. Graham's eyes met his for half a heartbeat, and in that glance, Nathan saw the question. How far are you taking this? Far enough, Nathan answered without words. He reached for the envelope. Marcus intercepted by slapping a pen against the front page. "No stalling. Sign." Evelyn's mouth hardened. "Mr. Vale can read first." Marcus gave a contemptuous laugh. "Can he?" Vivian stepped in smoothly, trying to sound soothing. "Nathan gets overwhelmed by legal language. If he sees it's from familiar people, he'll sign. It's fine." Evelyn turned her head toward her. "Your confidence in that is interesting, given yesterday's petition." The point hit home. Marcus swore under his breath. Graham still said nothing. Nathan took the pen. Then he let his hand shake. Not wildly, not theatrically, just enough. The metal tip touched the paper, dragged half an inch, stopped. Nathan frowned at the line like a man betrayed by his own fingers. "Rana," he whispered. Marcus rolled his eyes. "For God's sake." He reached forward. "I'll guide it." Graham moved before anyone expected him to. One step, just one. "You will not touch his hand," he said. The foyer went still again. It was the first time Graham had spoken, and his voice came out cold enough to frost glass. Vivian recovered first. "No one is coercing him," she said softly. Graham did not look at her, then let him refuse without a performance. Nathan lowered the pen and breathed unevenly, as if embarrassment were swallowing him whole. "Too many eyes," he muttered. Evelyn stepped in at once, seizing the exit he had created. "Recorded inability to sign under pressure," she said crisply, withdrawing the page. "That satisfies service." Marcus stared at her. "You came here for a signature." "I came here for acknowledgement," Evelyn replied. "And I have it." She folded the packet, but not before slipping a thinner, sealed envelope from inside and placing it on the foyer table. "This is for Mr. Vale's private review when he's calm." Vivian's gaze dropped to it at once. Nathan knew her too well. She would try to read it the moment no one was looking. Evelyn and Graham did not stay longer than necessary. That was part of the design. Their presence had bought him legal ground, not safety. As they turned toward the door, Graham paused beside Nathan just long enough to say, in the tone of a man speaking to the impaired for the benefit of everyone else, "Try to rest, sir." But his fingers tapped twice against the banister as he passed. Old code from boardroom days. 2 taps meant urgent. The envelope on the table mattered. They were gone into the rain, and the front door shut behind them with a heavy, echoing thud. The moment the latch caught, Marcus rounded on Vivian. "You let them walk in here and corner us in our own house?" Vivian ignored him. She had already taken the sealed envelope from the foyer table and turned it over in her hands. Nathan stood 3 paces away, letting his gaze wander across the chandelier light, across the marble floor, across nothing. "Give me that," Marcus said. Vivian pulled it back. "No." That answer came too fast and too sharp. It told Nathan she was afraid of what was inside. Marcus took 1 step closer. "If it's from Shaw, it's poison." "Which is why I'm reading it first," Vivian snapped. Clara appeared at the top of the staircase then, 1 hand on the rail, her face drawn from worry. She didn't call down. She only looked at Nathan. Rosalind, that look said. He answered with the slightest nod. He turned his face toward Vivian and asked, in the careful, lost tone that had opened so many doors for him already, "For me?" She tucked the envelope under her arm at once. "Later, darling." Nathan held out his hand anyway. "Please." For 1 dangerous moment, his voice almost sounded too steady. Marcus heard it. Nathan saw the flicker. So he added a beat too late. "Need familiar words." Vivian's shoulders loosened. Vanity again. Always vanity. "Of course," she said. "I'll read it to you after lunch." Lunch. That told Nathan he had a narrow window. The rest of the morning fractured into controlled movement. Marcus made calls in the study, angry and careless enough that pieces of his plan drifted out under the door. "No, stand down the transport for now," he hissed at one point. "Not canceled, delayed." Good. Rosalind wouldn't be hauled off before noon. Vivian took the sealed envelope into her bedroom suite and locked the door. Clara stayed with Rosalind, helping her sip broth and steady her breathing. Nathan moved through the house like a ghost with a bad memory, pausing where he needed to listen, forgetting where he needed to disarm suspicion. The act was exhausting him now in the bones. He could feel the story tightening to a single knot. Shortly before noon, Vivian summoned Clara to the dressing room. Nathan reached the hall outside just as Clara stepped inside. Through the crack before the door shut, he saw bolts of fabric, open jewelry cases, and that envelope lying on the mirrored vanity, already slid open. He heard Vivian say, "Since you care so much about appearances, you may as well help me dress for tomorrow." Clara did not answer. The door clicked closed. Nathan stayed where he was, 1 hand resting on the wall, listening. At first there was only fabric rustling, drawers opening, the soft clink of hangers. Vivian spoke again, low and vicious. "Do you know what Shaw sent?" A pause. "A notice that his mother's medical trust is already locked beyond any guardian's reach. A notice that the estate house can't be sold. A notice that if I mishandle him, I invite review." Another pause. "That is why you're dangerous. Ever since you came here, things that should have been simple have become complicated." Nathan's jaw hardened. Clara's voice came next, quiet and tired. "I didn't do any of that." Vivian laughed. "No, you only inspired it." Something shattered. Glass. Sharp. Sudden. Followed by Clara's breath catching. Nathan straightened instantly, and from inside the dressing room, Vivian said in a voice gone cold as wire, "Now look what you made me do." Nathan was through the door before the last shards stopped skittering across the hardwood. The dressing room smelled of perfume, hot fabric steam, and broken glass. A crystal scent bottle lay shattered near the vanity,
pale liquid spreading in a glittering arc over the rug. Clara stood very still beside the chair, one hand pulled tight against her palm. Blood slipped between her fingers in thin, bright lines and dripped onto the cream carpet. Vivian stood a few feet away with her breathing quick and her face flushed, though her voice came out cool. "She startled me," she said, as if explaining a clumsy spill.
I dropped it.
Nathan looked from the broken bottle to Clara's hand, then to the opened envelope on the vanity, then to the folded pages from his missing notebook beside it. Everything in the room told the truth at once. Clara tried to hide the injury out of instinct. "It's nothing," she said quickly. "Just the glass." Vivian gave a short laugh. "Please, don't perform." Nathan felt something dark and clean move through him. Clara's blood was already spotting the rug, and she was still trying to make the scene smaller so it wouldn't become another weapon in Vivian's hands. He crossed to her and reached for her wrist. Clara looked up, startled, because in all the weeks she had known him in this house, he had never touched her first unless he was pretending confusion or needing guidance. Now his grip was steady, real. He gently moved her fingers aside and saw the cut running across the heel of her palm. Not deep enough for stitches, probably, but ugly enough to sting for days. Vivian saw that too. She also saw his face while he looked at Clara's wound, and whatever she read there unsettled her. "Nathan," she said carefully, "come away from that. There's broken glass everywhere." He did not move. Clara, pale now, whispered, "Sir, please, your mother." Always back to Rosalind, even bleeding. Nathan released her hand only long enough to take the folded hand towel from the dressing stool and wrap it firmly around the cut. Then he looked at Vivian and let the old mask slip just enough to be dangerous. "Why," he asked softly, "was my notebook on your table?" Silence. The air seemed to go thin in the room. Clara looked from one to the other, not even reacting to the fact that he had just named the notebook openly. Vivian recovered a fraction too late. "Your what?" she asked. Nathan turned his gaze toward the pages beside the envelope. "The one you stole from my room." There it was. Not a full unveiling, not yet, but no longer the language of a man lost in fog. Vivian's lips parted. For one instant, she looked genuinely stripped. Then all the softness dropped from her face. "Get out," she said to Clara. "Now!" Clara did not move. Nathan did. "No, you leave." The two words landed like a slap. But this was not the time, not yet. He saw that almost as soon as he said it. Saw the danger in Clara's widening eyes, in Vivian's immediate stillness, in the pages exposed on the vanity. If this turned into open war inside the dressing room, the hearing tomorrow would shrink into a domestic mess. Vivian would scream, Marcus would come running, Clara would get blamed for the broken glass and the blood and the notebook and everything else in sight. Nathan forced himself back one step from the cliff. He put a hand to his forehead, inhaled sharply, and let his gaze lose focus. "Too many words," he muttered. "Too many." Then he turned from Vivian to Clara as if the whole burst had been a flash of overstimulation. "Hand hurt," he said. Clara caught on faster than most trained actors ever could. "Yes," she answered softly. "I need to clean it." Vivian stared at him in disbelief, trying to decide whether she had just witnessed lucidity or one more wild flare from a damaged mind. Nathan gave her nothing stable to hold. He let his shoulders sag, glanced at the broken bottle as if it were an unsolved puzzle, and murmured, "Smells sharp." That uncertainty bought them a sliver of space. Vivian seized it because she needed it too. "Take her to the bathroom and bandage it," she snapped. "Then I want her out of my sight." Nathan did not argue. He took Clara by the uninjured arm and led her out. In the adjoining bath, he locked the door. The marble counter was cold beneath Clara's wrist. Nathan unwrapped the blood-soaked towel, ran warm water, and held her hand under the stream while crimson curled into the sink. She winced, more from surprise than pain, watching him the whole time. "You almost ended it in there," she whispered.
I know. He tore open a sterile packet, cleaned the cut with disinfectant, and wrapped it with clean gauze from the cabinet. His fingers were precise, gentler than she expected from a man raised with staff for everything. She has the pages, Clara said. Some of them. Nathan tied the bandage and met her eyes in the mirror. Not the first pages, not the hospital words, not the full record. Clara let out a breath that trembled. What if tomorrow she uses what she found and says you've been hallucinating in writing? Then I let her talk, Nathan replied. The more she explains me, the less she watches herself. A knock sounded on the bathroom door, hard this time. Marcus. You done playing nurse in there? We leave for court early. Vivian wants everyone ready before 8. Court. The word hung there between them. Clara lowered her eyes. She won't let me near you tomorrow. Nathan dried his hands and spoke very quietly. She doesn't get that choice. Then, after the briefest pause, whatever happens at the hearing, stay in the room. Do not leave, even if they insult you, even if they threaten you, even if they say, I don't know your name. Clara looked up. The fear in her face was real, but so was the steadiness beneath it. All right. When they opened the door, Marcus was waiting in the hall with a smile that did not reach his eyes. He glanced at Clara's bandaged hand, then passed Nathan toward the dressing room where Vivienne stood gathering the torn notebook pages into a leather folder. Good, Marcus said. Now we can all stop pretending this household isn't a disaster. He lifted his phone, checked the screen, and added with grim satisfaction. And just so everyone understands the stakes, Denise has agreed to testify in the morning. By dawn, the house felt less like a home than a polished machine built to drag 3 people into court and crush whichever one had the least money. Rain still clung to the windows in thin silver streaks. The staff spoke in half voices. Doors opened and shut with unnatural care. Somewhere downstairs, Marcus was already on a call, pacing and snapping at someone about timing, witness arrival, and keeping the old woman calm enough to present. Nathan had not slept. He sat on the edge of his bed while Clara, moving with one bandaged hand and one steady one, laid out a dark suit, a white shirt, and the plain tie Rosalind used to say made him look like his father when he meant business. The irony of that almost made him laugh. Clara buttoned the cuffs for him because she needed the excuse to stand close and speak without being overheard. Marcus left his phone on the hall table for a minute, she murmured, eyes on the cuff. I saw a message from Denise. She's on her way. Nathan gave the smallest nod. Good, let her come. Clara looked up at him then, the bruise of tiredness beneath her eyes, the small nick near her wrist from yesterday's broken glass, the tension in her mouth. All of it hit him harder than it should have. I don't think she's coming to tell the truth, she said. Neither do I. He paused, then added, but lies sound different when they have to stand under oath. Clara swallowed. And what about those pages Vivian took? Nathan's jaw tightened. She'll use them if she thinks they help, or hide them if they don't. Either way, she'll reveal more than she means to. A knock came at the door without waiting for permission. Vivian entered dressed in cream and charcoal, every hair in place, every expression chosen. She looked like sorrow made expensive. There you are, she said. The car will be ready in 10 minutes. Her eyes dropped at once to Clara's bandaged hand. Still dramatic, I see. Clara stepped back from Nathan and lowered her gaze. It's covered. Vivian smiled faintly. Try not to bleed on the courthouse. Nathan kept his face still, but something in him had started to go cold in a new way. Precision. The closer they came to the hearing, the less he felt like a wounded man avenging himself. He felt like an accountant of moral debt, ready to call the figures due. Rosalind insisted on going. That had not been part of Vivian's plan, and everyone knew it. When Clara wheeled her into the front hall, wrapped in a navy blanket, hair softly brushed, oxygen tucked discreetly behind the chair, Marcus actually stopped talking.
Rosalind was fragile, yes, but she was also unmistakably present. Her eyes moved with awareness. Her hand rested on the armrest with quiet will. "You should stay home," Vivian said at once, all honey. Rosalind turned her head just enough to look at her and whispered, "No." One word, thin but final. Nathan walked beside the chair as they went out to the car, and Clara came on the other side with one hand on the handle. To anyone watching, it might have looked like loyal care around a week-old woman. In truth, it was a small, moving barricade. The courthouse smelled of wet wool, floor polish, and old paper. Everything about it was plain in the way powerful places like to be plain. No gold, no velvet, just stone, glass, and rules. The hearing room itself was smaller than Nathan remembered from other legal matters. Bright overhead lights, pale wood, a long bench for the judge, no place for melodrama to hide, which made people like Vivian perform harder. She had dressed for sympathy, and she wore it well. Marcus sat one row behind her. Denise arrived 5 minutes before the clerk called the matter, carrying a leather portfolio and a face arranged into grave professional concern. She didn't look at Clara. That told Nathan more than eye contact would have. Before they were called inside, Vivian made one last move. She crossed the corridor to where Clara stood near Rosalind's chair and spoke just softly enough that only the three of them could hear. "After today, you won't come back to the house," she said. "Take whatever pride you have left and leave quietly." Clara held her gaze for the first time in full daylight. "I'll go where Mrs. Vale goes." Vivian's mouth hardened. "No, you'll go where your wages stop." Then she leaned closer, almost smiling. "And if you're foolish enough to speak out of turn in there, I will say you manipulated a confused man, mishandled an elderly patient, and bled all over my home while playing martyr." Nathan heard every word from 6 feet away. He did nothing. Not yet. Clara didn't answer at all. She simply laid a hand over Rosalind's blanket. That silence infuriated Vivian more than tears would have. Then the bailiff opened the door and called the case. Inside, the hearing began exactly the way Nathan knew it would. Vivian's attorney spoke first, polished and sorrowful, painting Nathan as a man who no longer knew his own routines, who could not sign documents reliably, who wandered the house at night confused, who was vulnerable to influence. Next was Denise, who testified with infuriating calm that the care environment had become unstable, that Clara had blurred professional boundaries, that Rosalind's recent medication incident suggested emotional overreach by unlicensed household staff. Marcus added his piece too, dressed in concern but unable to hide contempt. He said Nathan had deteriorated further, that Rosalind's room had become a private stage controlled by Clara, and that immediate, centralized guardianship was the only responsible option. Through all of it, Nathan sat beside his counsel with his hands loosely clasped and his gaze lowered. The judge asked him 2 easy questions first: his full name, the month. Nathan answered the first after a delay and missed the second by 1. A murmur moved through the room. Vivian relaxed by half an inch. Good, Nathan thought. Believe it. Believe every second of it. He let the act hold even as his heart hammered. He had given them enough rope, enough pages, enough private scenes, enough lies spoken in confidence. Now all he needed was the final invitation, the formal question, the one that would turn this from performance into reckoning. At last the judge looked directly at him and said, "Mr. Vale, do you understand why Miss Vivian Mercer is asking this court to place you under guardianship today?" Nathan lifted his head, and for the first time in weeks, he did not let confusion reach his eyes. The change in his face was so small that anyone blinking might have missed it. But the courtroom felt it. The slack uncertainty vanished from Nathan's eyes first. His shoulders straightened. His hands, which had rested loosely in his lap through the whole hearing, became still with a kind of control no frightened patient could fake by accident. Even the air seemed to tighten. The judge had asked a simple question. Nathan answered in a voice no one in that room had heard from him since before the crash. Calm, level, unmistakably clear. "Yes, Your Honor," he he said. I understand exactly why Miss Vivian Mercer is asking for guardianship. She wants legal control of my accounts, authority over my company decisions, and a clear path to remove my mother from my home and sell property my father left behind. No one moved. Marcus's mouth fell open first. Denise's pen stopped over her notebook. Clara did not breathe at all. Vivian stared at Nathan as if the floor had tilted beneath her chair. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Vale, are you saying you have understood these proceedings the entire time? Nathan did not look away. I'm saying my memory was never gone. A rustle swept through the benches. Someone behind Marcus whispered, My God. Vivian found her voice and almost stood. He's having a lucid spell, she said quickly. This happens under stress. People with head trauma can. Nathan cut across her, still polite, which made it worse. At the hospital, while I was lying in bed after the crash, you asked the doctors a question before you asked whether I would recover. He turned his head toward the judge. She said, and I remember this exactly, if his memory doesn't come back, who controls the trust, the house, and the resort shares? Those were her bedside words. Not, will he live? Not, is he in pain? That. Vivian's face drained so fast it seemed to pull the color from her throat, too. Nathan continued before she could recover. Last night, in my house, her brother said my mother should be moved before today so the maid would lose what he called her stage. Yesterday morning, my fiancé described my mother's care as an expense problem and told a paid nurse how to phrase doubt for this court. Objection, Vivian's lawyer blurted, standing at last. Narrative, unverified, highly prejudicial. Sit down, the judge said sharply, never taking her eyes off Nathan. Mr. Vale, if you are making allegations of fraud on this court, you will do so carefully. Nathan nodded. I intend to. He turned slightly toward Clara. She stood at the back beside Rosalind's chair, one bandaged hand resting on the blanket exactly where it had been all morning. The only person in my house who has acted without self-interest since the accident is the woman you were all encouraged to distrust, Nathan said. She protected my mother. She documented medication schedules. She caught an unmarked pill planted near my mother's cart. She spent her own money on emergency refills when others preferred delay. And when my mother needed help, she chose my mother over herself every single time. Clara's eyes filled instantly, but she did not move. Nathan looked back to the bench. Meanwhile, the people asking this court to name me incompetent coached testimony, tampered with records, searched my room, and removed pages from my private notes. That landed on Vivian like a slap she could not dodge. Those pages, she said suddenly, too loudly, seizing on the wrong thing in panic, prove you've been unstable. You wrote paranoid nonsense. You accused me of theft, of poisoning, of manipulation. She stopped because she heard herself too late. Nathan turned his head slowly toward her. Thank you, he said. Her lips parted. The judge's expression sharpened. Miss Mercer, she said, what pages? Vivian tried to retreat, but there was no room left. His writings. He has episodes. I found them while trying to help him dress. Nathan gave the faintest nod, as if a final lock had just clicked open. So you did search my room, he said, and you did take my pages. Vivian's attorney closed his eyes for a second, already knowing the damage. Marcus muttered something vicious under his breath. Denise looked down at her lap. The judge lifted a hand for silence, but the room was already quiet. Nathan reached inside his inner coat pocket and drew out a folded sheet. Just one page he had prepared for exactly this moment, written in his own hand, dated, precise, and sealed the night before with Evelyn Shaw as witness. Your Honor, he said, I anticipated that if this hearing happened before I chose to speak, I might need to start with the simplest proof first. I ask that this be marked. It contains the exact hospital statement I heard, the date of the sedative incident involving my mother, and the names of the people who can verify the financial protections already filed beyond any proposed guardianship. He handed it to his counsel, who passed it forward. Vivian made a broken little sound in her throat, half disbelief, half anger. She understood now that the trap had not snapped shut by accident. He had let it close around her, inch by inch. The judge unfolded the page and read the first lines in silence. She looked up at Vivian and said, "I think we are no longer here for the hearing Miss Mercer expected." No one in that courtroom looked comfortable anymore, except Nathan. The shift was almost cruel in its simplicity. For weeks he had been the one studied, doubted, managed, narrated by other people. Now every eye in the room had turned and fixed itself on Vivian, on Marcus, on Denise, on the lawyer who suddenly wished he had asked more questions before filing anything in his client's name. The judge placed Nathan's handwritten statement on the bench, folded her hands, and said, "We will proceed carefully from here. Miss Mercer, you may remain seated. Mr. Vale, if you have additional evidence, now is the time to identify it." Nathan nodded once. His counsel stood, but Nathan answered for himself. "Yes, Your Honor. There are 3 things that matter most: medical proof regarding my mother, financial proof regarding motive, and witness behavior here today." Vivian's attorney rose again, trying to slow the collapse. "Your Honor, this is devolving into theater." The judge didn't even look at him. "It became theater when your client presented a man as incompetent who is answering with clarity and recollection." Then she turned to Denise. "Nurse Harrow, remain where you are." Denise gripped her folder so tightly the leather bent under her fingers. Nathan began with the medical piece because that was the one no one decent could shrug away. "Dr. Brenner's toxicology screen on the water glass is already before the court clerk," he said. "It confirms a concentrated sedative inconsistent with my mother's prescribed schedule. Dr. Brenner can also testify that the sample pack containing that sedative was handled during Miss Mercer's arranged household review." Denise's face changed at once. Fear.
Marcus saw it and muttered, "Keep your mouth shut." That was his mistake. The judge heard him. "Mr. Mercer," she said sharply, "you will not coach anyone in my courtroom." Clara, standing near Rosalind's chair, lifted her chin for the first time. Nathan glanced at her only briefly, but it was enough. She was still there. He turned to motive. "My chief financial officer, Mr. Graham Pierce, is present," Nathan said. Graham stood from the second row, rain-damp coat now folded over his arm. "Mr. Pierce can confirm unusual spending from household petty accounts during the period of my supposed incapacity. Private lunches, event invoices, luxury transport, floral bills, and personal entertainment charges approved by Miss Mercer while my mother's medications were being questioned as too costly." Vivian gave a disbelieving little laugh. "Petty accounts? You're trying to smear me over flowers?" Nathan didn't even look at her. "No. I'm showing the court that the same woman who called my mother's care too expensive had no issue using house funds for herself." Graham, invited by the judge, stepped forward and handed over a summary packet. "All charges were logged under household maintenance and guest relations," he said. "They do not match any business need." The judge skimmed the first page and her mouth tightened. Vivian's lawyer made one last effort. "Even if these expenses were improper, that does not prove a fraudulent guardianship petition." Nathan finally turned to him. "No, her own mouth does that." He looked back to the bench. "I wrote down the hospital statement because it was the first betrayal. I kept recording what followed because I needed to know whether it was panic or character. It was character." His counsel passed forward a sealed packet Evelyn had prepared. Copies of the dated notes, the filing receipts for the trust protections, and the page listing who had access to what documents and when. Vivian saw the packet and went completely still. She knew that packet existed only if he had been observing far longer than she ever imagined. The judge asked the next question quietly. "Miss Mercer, did you search Mr. Vale's private room and remove pages from his writing?" Vivian hesitated. Just one beat. But in court, one beat is forever. "I found papers while helping him dress," she said at last.
I believe they reflected instability. Nathan answered immediately. She also told me in front of the maid that she found them while tidying my room. She has changed that story in less than 24 hours. The judge's gaze sharpened. Miss Mercer? No good answer existed. Marcus tried to cut in. This is ridiculous. He's spinning domestic nonsense into "sit down," the judge snapped, louder than before. Denise came. She had the look of someone who had entered for a fee and found herself standing on the edge of perjury. Nurse Harrow, the judge said, were you coached on the language of your care concerns? Denise's throat worked. Vivian's eyes flashed toward her like a warning. Nathan saw it. So did everyone else now. Denise said nothing. The judge repeated the question. The bailiff shifted near the wall. Finally, Denise spoke, but her voice had changed. I was encouraged to note emotional attachment, she said, and irregular boundaries. By whom? Silence again. Marcus whispered something fierce under his breath. Denise closed her eyes for half a second. By Miss Mercer. A ripple went through the room so physical it almost sounded like wind. Vivian stood up so fast her chair scraped. You lying little coward! Sit down, barked the judge. This time the gavel struck once, hard. Everything after that happened quickly, but not cleanly. The guardianship petition was suspended on the spot pending review of possible fraud. The judge ordered all medical decision-making for Rosalind left unchanged under Dr. Brenner's directive and barred any transfer without direct physician approval. She referred the toxicology result, the contradictory statements, and the financial packet to the appropriate authorities for immediate examination. Marcus started arguing about overreach. Vivian started crying from the rage of losing an audience she thought she controlled. Her lawyer looked 20 years older than he had an hour earlier. Clara gripped the handles of Rosalind's chair so tightly her knuckles went white. And through all of it, Nathan remained still. He had wanted the truth public. Public is rarely graceful. The judge spoke one last line before the bailiff moved. Miss Mercer, until those referrals are resolved, I would advise you not to leave this building. That was the moment it truly landed. Vivian turned toward Nathan with a look so full of naked hatred, it stripped every last trace of glamour from her. You used me, she hissed. Nathan rose at last. No, he said. I let you reveal yourself. The bailiff stepped closer. Marcus cursed aloud. Denise sat down and covered her face. Clara looked at Nathan like she had not fully caught up to the fact that the storm was finally breaking in the direction of justice. Nathan stepped away from counsel, away from the bench, away from the wreckage of the petition, and walked directly toward Clara. He stopped in front of her, eyes lowering to the bandaged hand she had tried all morning to hide. The whole courtroom, still vibrating from the collapse of Vivian's case, went silent again to see what he would do next. He stopped in front of Clara and, for the first time since the crash, did something in full view of everyone without disguise. Nathan took her bandaged hand gently in both of his and turned it palm up, careful of the cut. The courtroom was so quiet that even Rosalind's oxygen tube gave a soft little hiss in the silence. This, he said, looking not at Clara now, but at the judge, is what loyalty looked like in my house. Then he raised his eyes to Clara again. While other people priced rooms, counted shares, coached witnesses, and searched drawers, you kept my mother breathing. Clara's mouth trembled. She tried to pull her hand back out of habit, out of class reflex, out of everything she had been taught about her place in rooms like this. Nathan did not let go. He turned and faced the bench. I want the record to reflect one more thing. If this court had granted that petition today, the wrong person would have lost her home. That was when the judge finally exhaled, long and tired, like a woman closing a trap on the people who thought they were clever enough to build it. What followed was not elegant. Real justice rarely is. The petition was dismissed in full. Protective orders were entered over Rosalind's medical care and residence before the hour was over. Dr. Brenner's report and the toxicology findings were referred for criminal review. Denise, pale and shaking, asked to amend her testimony before she left the stand. And once she started speaking, without Vivian's script in her mouth, the rest came fast. The coached language, the pressure calls, the household visit arranged to create concern, not assess it. Marcus tried to storm out and was stopped at the door. Vivian did not cry this time. She went white, then furious, then cold. And when the officers approached, she looked at Nathan with the same hatred she had worn privately for weeks, only now there was nowhere left to hide it. "You were never broken," she said. Nathan answered in the plainest voice he owned. "No, I was listening." They led her away, still demanding she be heard. Marcus followed under protest. Their shoes clicked and scraped and faded into the corridor, and the room they left behind felt larger by several feet. The days after were made of practical mercies. Graham and Evelyn moved faster than gossip. Rosalind remained in her own room under proper care, with nurses chosen by Brenner and paid from the trust Nathan had locked before Vivian ever reached court. The old estate house was secured. The company board held. Denise cooperated fully once subpoenaed, and the case against Vivian and Marcus deepened from bad judgment into fraud, coercion, and reckless endangerment. Clara tried 3 separate times to resign anyway. The first was from embarrassment. The second was from pride. The third was because she still thought gratitude should end where class began. Nathan refused all 3 times. He did it differently each time, too. No grand speeches. Once he simply tore up the letter in front of her. Once he asked who else would remind Rosalind that too much sugar in tea made her cough. And once, when Clara stood in the sunroom with her coat on and her mended hand clenched at her side, he said, "If you leave because you want a better life, I'll drive you there myself. If you leave because someone taught you that care only counts when it comes from people with titles, then stay and let that lie die in this house." She cried then, quietly because they were true. 8 months later, the mansion no longer sounded the same. No one rushed when doors opened. No one lowered their voice in fear at the turn of a hallway. Rosalind had color in her face again and enough strength to sit through afternoon tea by the conservatory windows. Clara no longer wore the agency uniform. At first, she kept folding the plain blue dresses into the bottom drawer out of habit, but over time, the drawer stayed closed. Nathan never announced some dramatic transformation. He just changed the shape of the house around her until the truth had room to stand up. He moved her mother into proper treatment. He put Clara on salary under her own name. He restored the staff Vivian had driven out and made sure every person in service knew the rules were the same for all of them now. One soft evening, when rain tapped at the glass roof and the first white blossoms were opening on the indoor lemon tree Rosalind loved, Nathan found Clara kneeling beside a cracked clay pot, pressing dark soil around a transplanted stem that had looked half dead all winter. Her hands were dirty. Her hair had come loose. There was a smudge of earth near her cheek. He stood there a moment, watching her save one more living thing with patience instead of noise. Then he crouched beside her, set a small velvet box on the tile between them, and said, "I spent weeks pretending I'd forgotten my life. You were the part of it worth remembering on purpose." Inside the box was no showpiece, no chandelier of diamonds, just a simple ring with a deep green stone the color of new leaves after rain. Clara looked at it, then at him, and the answer came before the tears did. Rosalind, from her chair by the window, laughed softly and dabbed at her eyes with a napkin as Clara said yes. He just rested his forehead against hers for a second and breathed like a man who had finally come in from bad weather. By the next morning, the transplanted stem in the cracked pot was still standing, a little straighter than it had the night before. On the windowsill above it, 3 damp teacups waited for someone to wash them, and the house did not mind waiting. If this story stayed with you, leave a like and subscribe. There are more long stories here where the truth takes its time and still arrives.